What revenge of yours hit the victim way worse than you thought it would, to the point you said, maybe I shouldn't have done that? I'm still mad at myself for this. When I was a preteen, my friend and I went to one of those day camps that picked us up in yellow school buses. One of the other kids on our bus was a younger boy I'll refer to as Eli. Eli was a effing terror. He would scream and spit and hump things, make a mess, and be as annoying and insufferable as possible. Riding the bus with him was a nightmare for everyone involved most of the time. So I came up with this idea. I found his family in the phone book and called up pretending to be a camp counselor. I told his mom that he was misbehaving on the bus and that he would either be disciplined or kicked out of the camp if he didn't stop. She bought it. She said she would talk to him about it. I felt so effing smart. Until the next day, when a quiet, sullen Eli showed up with a black eye. Edit. Apparently, a lot of you don't believe that a preteen could convincingly sound like a camp counselor over the phone. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe the static of our connection made my fake adult voice more convincing, or Eli's parents were really gullible, or they were just looking for any old excuse to beat up their kid. I don't remember the precise details of a conversation I had like 17 years ago, but I really did call his family, and he really did show up with the black eye the next day. If I were going to lie about this, I'd have probably come up with a cooler story. Story 2. Coworker and I had a friendly prank war spanning 2 years. Close to the end of our war, he iced my car. Icing involves taking a hose to the parking lot every half hour and spraying a light mist over your victim's car when it's below zero out. I finished my 12-hour shift to find a car encased in 2 inches of ice. My revenge was, I thought, both more inconvenient for him and less freezing my balls off for me. I decided to take a bedsheet, drape it over his car, and only took 4 or 5 trips out with the hose the next night. So the next morning, he finds his car with a 1/4 inch of ice freezing a sheet to his car. When he started peeling off the sheet, he pulled his windshield wipers, arms and all, off his ratty Jeep. I got a very pissed off phone call. I felt bad. The unwritten rule was embarrassing or inconvenient, no damage. I paid for repairs and he got his revenge. He planted a dozen pieces of smoked herring throughout my car. Took me 6 months to find the last piece, hidden under the carpet under the back window of my car. I can still smell it. I don't even own the car anymore. Story 3. I'm a teacher and of course have to deal with misbehaving kids on a regular basis. Problem is, many kids misbehave because of bad/abusive parenting. So too often, parent contacts or parent meetings don't have the same impact you think they would. So I do my best playing the role of the disciplinarian dad in their lives. I tell his teachers whenever he misbehaves to let me know. My go-to discipline is to clean my classroom. Hey, I don't have to clean it, so kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, the key isn't just the negative discipline. The most important part is to give positive rewards when they do something good. If they spent the whole day not causing a ruckus, comment on it. If a kid who normally doesn't pass tests gets a C or higher, make them feel like they just effing won the Super Bowl. Many of these kids don't get any positive reinforcement at home, and this, more often than not, goes a long way to having misbehaving students stop. On a funnier note, one freak year I had no misbehaving students. You'd think I'd be happy, but my thoughts were, I have to clean my own damn room. Story 4. My older brother was always quite horrible to me as a child, and my parents never really did much about it. He was also much bigger than me, so I couldn't retaliate in a physical way, cause I would be swiftly cripple crossface/walls of Jericho'd. One day I had just had enough. My revenge? He had been playing Rome Total War for a good 6 hours a day for about 3 weeks. I started a new game and overwrote his save file. Never seen fury like it. I regretted it at the time, cause he was so angry it scared me, and it made him dislike me even more, but now I praise my 13-year-old self for hitting him where it clearly hurt the most. Edit. Some of you are asking how our relationship is now. It's okay. I moved away as soon as I hit 18, so I didn't see much of the family for some years. Yeah, never, ever mess with a 13-year-old save file on an old school video game. Like, if someone did that to me and, wiped out my progress in Final Fantasy VII or, Tomb Raider or something like that on the PS1, I'd be so devastated. So devastated. Story 5. Had a big group of friends from 13 to 18. When we were 17, one of them stole my girlfriend. To be fair, he legitimately knew we were going out. He got her drunk and shagged her at a party. He knew I'd find out. Said to my face he didn't care. Tough crap, mate. It was her fault as well, of course. She wasn't passed out or anything like that. She'd been leading him on, and was sober enough to consent, if drunk enough to get over the social stigma of actually doing it. So from that point on, our group of friends just cut this guy out of our circle. We stopped inviting him to stuff. If he tried to hang out, we told him to piss off. Mates that had been friends with him since primary school just ignored him. Initially, I was super proud of this show of solidarity from my bros. My best mate was actually dating my now ex-girlfriend's best mate, and he split up with her because of her attitude about the whole thing, trying to defend her friend to him, and make him hang out with them as a foursome. So, first summer back from uni, we're all 19 to 20. We see him in a local pub. I don't know what to do. Decide to try and be cool about it, and go up to say hi. He tells me to F off. I guess he blames me for all his friends cutting him out of his life. I don't get the chance to explain that I in no way asked them to do that. They just did what they saw as the right thing. 2 weeks later, we're in the same pub, and I see his younger sister. She's 17 now. Very, very attractive. I start a conversation with her about her brother, and how I feel bad about what we did. She says that it did really hurt him, but he's got some new friends now, mostly from uni, and is still with my ex, despite a long-distance relationship over the uni semesters. He won't talk to any of us old friends, though, which I think is a genuine shame. He's known some of the guys since we were 5. One drink leads to another with this girl, and we end up back at her house. Her parents are away. Her brother is staying at my ex's flat. She has her own flat, didn't go to uni and got a job, so empty house. We end up shagging. Next morning, her bro calls round just as I'm leaving. The look on his face as he works out what's happened. He goes from utter despair to absolutely mental in about half a second. Eventually, I just had to leave. His sister finally managed to explain to him that it was nothing to do with revenge or anything, and that I was genuinely sorry for how we treated him. I don't know if she told him the whole conversation we had about how I'd feel bad as I didn't want to upset him anymore, and she convinced me to come back to hers by saying she was her own woman, could make her own decisions, and he wasn't due to be home at any time. If he hadn't have randomly turned up, I hope he'd have never known. He still won't accept my Facebook friend request, though. Okay, first of all, screw this guy. Like, he's not even worth taking the high road on. Why are you trying to be his friend again? You know, the fact that he's not willing to accept the olive branch that you really shouldn't even be extending to him just shows what a massive tool bag he is. Let him go, cut him off, and get with his sister. Not for revenge, but because you like her. Simple as that. Story 6. I guess revenge implies thinking out the act or sometime between acts. But at the age of 14, I was rolling up the hose in my backyard with a friend since my mother told me to. The 2 girls next door were playing in their backyard and come over to talk. One 12 or so and the other about 7. The 12-year-old happened to be standing on the hose, and I asked her to move. She did not. I pulled the hose hard enough to make her fall over. At this point, the 7-year-old screamed bloody murder and ran right at me and bit me right on the stomach. She was not letting go, and I could see blood starting to stain my shirt. I grabbed her head and tried to pull her away, but nothing. So I just full-on punched her right in the eye. I was/am not proud of this, but it had to be done. What was worse is that the house was owned by a local church where I happened to go to Boy Scouts. Everyone quickly knew I had punched a 7-year-old and given her a black eye, but no one cared why. Story 7. When I was a kid, I was at a local river, a great swimming spot lots of people come to. My friend pushes me in the river, and naturally I came up sputtering and a little red in the face, but it was all in good fun. For the rest of the day, I planned to get her back, waiting for my opportunity to push her in, until she was at the edge of the river drying off. I pushed her, but her flailing and slippery nature of the rocks she was on made her slip on the spot, and instead of just splashing into the water, she landed on her back, hitting the rocks hard, and then fell into the water. She was winded, but thankfully otherwise unharmed. Our parents were furious at me, and I just spent the few seconds it took to get her out, felt like a lot longer to me, just hoping I hadn't broken her back or something. 2 out of 10 revenge, would not do again. Story 8. When I was 11, my older brother was 16. We would fight and argue, but one time I was running up the stairs away from him, and he whipped the back of my legs with a long rubber chew toy. It left a pretty big, figure-8-shaped welt on my legs. I knew he was faster and stronger than me, and I knew if I tried to attack him, he'd stop me. So I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and held it over the stove until it was red hot. I ran up to him and very openly went to stab him, knowing he'd stop me. He grabbed my wrist to stop my thrust, as anticipated, and I pushed the red-hot head of it into his forearm as hard as I could. Man, I was a crazy a-hole as a kid. Sorry, Mike. Edit. Wow. Didn't expect this much response to my weird childhood story. Yes, he had a scar for years. I'll never forget the sound of his scream. I felt terrible. Good news, we're now super close. I was the best man at his wedding and am godfather to one of his kids. Everything's great between us now. Story 9. Had a neighbor yell at my younger brother about his weight, and I took it extra personal. Didn't know how to get him back without getting caught. Then I figured out I could place nails just under the back of the tire, so when he pulled out of the driveway, he'd run over them. Turns out, he was super poor and couldn't afford the repairs. My dad had to carpool with him to work for a month or so. I've never told anyone. Edit 2. If my memory is correct, I believe my brother was doing some yard work or playing and became out of breath and winded, so he stopped. The adult must have been upset and then said something along the lines of, "If you were skinnier, you wouldn't have this problem." Edit 3. I was 10 or 11. Brother was 9. Last edit. I swear, my brother had been made fun of a lot in school for his weight because he couldn't keep up with the other kids at lunch. If you've never been able to play with the other kids because of medical problems, it's really degrading and hurts. So when an adult pointed out his insecurities, he felt like they were real and not in his head. In my stupid kid brain, I figured neither me or my bro should say what had happened. If my dad found out about the weight comments, it would come back around that I effed the guy's tires up. I realized the truth would have been best, but hey, I was 10. Really, the last edit. To all the nice people who are saying something along the lines of, "You're no better," or even worse than that guy for ruining his tires and giving him financial trouble, a couple problems with that. 1. It wasn't a thought-out plan, my dudes. I was 10 and wanted to get simple revenge. It wasn't a plot to uproot this man's finances. 2. The main Reddit post is literally about realizing you went too far. 3. Some people may not have a brother or a bond with a brother that puts you instantly in attack mode when that sibling is hurt or in danger. I mean it. You hurt my brothers, I'm coming down on you like bombs. 4. F that guy. He made his choice, I made mine. He got some mean karma for some mean words, and I'm sure as hell I got some karma from those punctures. Want to mess with little brothers? F 'em, I say. Story 10. When I was about 7 or 8, there was this girl at my school that was absolutely horrible. We'll call her Cindy. Cindy would run up to you and pull your hair out, steal the toy you were playing with, eat your snack at snack time, etc. In other words, she was a real female dog. One day, as we're finishing up recess in the playground, she came up to me, pulled my hair, and took some with it. That was the last straw. As the teacher was gathering everyone inside and wasn't looking our way, I grabbed Cindy by her pigtail and dragged her over to the playground. Now, this playground was built weird, with a sort of enclosed area in the middle of 3 bridges that formed a triangle that you couldn't get out of. Sometimes us bigger kids would jump in there during hide and seek and climb out later. But Cindy couldn't because she was shorter. So I picked her up and threw her down in there and left to go back inside. It wasn't until an hour later when the teacher realized that Cindy wasn't in class. I didn't say where she was, and it took them another half hour to find her. I got in trouble and had to spend the next week in the principal's office, and lost my Game Boy for a month. But Cindy never messed with me again. Story 11. Way back in elementary school, a friend threw a piece of chalk that hit me square in the forehead. It was the most humiliating moment for younger me, as everyone who saw that started laughing their asses off. Kids are a-holes. I plotted and planned my revenge, to get back in the exact same fashion over the next couple of days. One fine day, weapon in hand, I find him perfectly placed a chalk throw away from me. I yell at his name and quickly launch the projectile as he spins around. For some reason, he had his mouth open as he looked at me, and the piece of chalk flew directly into his throat. His eyes widen and he starts choking. I stood frozen in shock as he fell on his knees coughing. Luckily, somebody grabbed him from behind and thumped his back, so he swallowed the piece. An adult walks in, cannot remember who it was at the time, but she looks at me and asks what happened. At this point, I'm shaking, realizing I narrowly killed my friend. I say it was a mint. My friend, also shaken at this point, laughs it off, saying it went straight into his throat and that he didn't taste it. The adult shakes her head and says next time, just hand it like a normal person, and walks away. Years later, when we were moving away to another country, I remind him about the incident and come clean about the whole thing. He snaps and yells, "I knew it!" Story 12. This kid in my class at school kept insulting my mother, so I said to him that if he insults her one more time, that I'll get him after class. "Your mom's a slut," he replied. So after class, I waited for him outside, and when he came out the classroom, I got him in a headlock. He forced his way up out of it, and then he managed to crack the top of his head off a fire alarm, gashed his head open. He was bleeding all down his face and had to go to hospital. He was off school for 2 weeks after that, too. I felt horrible about it. Edit. I can see this is causing quite a stir, so let me just clarify that this guy was a class idiot that misbehaved and always disrupted class. After I watched him hit his head off the fire alarm, I didn't see any blood. I had walked off at that point. Then he walked past me 2 minutes later, and his head was gushing and he was crying. I felt so bad that I apologized to him whilst following him all the way to the nurse's room. I sat outside the nurse's room until the ambulance came. I didn't get in any trouble because he admitted it was his fault for goading me, and I was genuinely remorseful at it too. For those who want to know about severity, it was a bad gash. His whole face was streaming down with blood. It looked like he'd been axed in the top of his head with a meat cleaver. He had to get his head glued back together. The scar after was about 2 inches in size. Edit 3. My only intention was to get him in a headlock and then give him a black eye. When he cracked his head, I decided it wasn't any longer necessary to punch him due to the fact that he squirmed in pain. This did in fact happen years ago, around the year of 99 if I remember correctly. The rules were different back then. Final edit. The question was, how was the relationship between you guys after? It was alright. He was happy that he got a few weeks off school. Everyone hates school. I was glad to see him back at school. He showed me a scar and we laughed about it. We both knew that it was an accident and we moved on. We had mutual respect for each other after. Glad you enjoyed my cracking story, guys, and thank you for all the upvotes. So I was going to comment on one of the earlier posts, but this one, I just want to bring it up. The fact that he makes the comment, it was around the year of 1999, the rules were different back then. Absolutely. Like, for those that were around back then, anything kind of went. Like, you could get away with things in school without even so much as, like, a detention or a trip to the principal's office that nowadays would get you like expelled from school. So some of these stories I'm reading, I'm like, yeah, I don't really see that happening. But then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this probably took place, in the 20th century or earlier. So yeah, different times, the human race as a whole was a lot more tolerant and allowed people to grow and mature through experience instead of being told what they should and shouldn't do, what they should and should not believe. Also, of course, before the advent of the internet and social media, so you couldn't go on Facebook immediately afterwards and trash somebody online, right? If you had an issue with someone, you had to confront them in person, and that's just the way that it was. And nobody was filming the fight and putting it on a TikTok reel, so man, miss those times. Story 13. When I was either 6 or 7, I had been bullied by my neighbors on the bus. They had harassed me with toy knives, which at the time I thought were real, and had all around been very disgusting, with me trying to talk about sex and other things around me and trying to take away my innocence, which at the time I had no clue what they were talking about. I had had enough of it and had told my mother, which told their mother what had happened, and I wouldn't necessarily say they didn't deserve what had happened to them, but I was a very empathetic kid, and what happened to them had scarred me for most of my childhood. Their mother told their father about their bad behavior and had beaten them quite badly. They left me alone for the remainder of my time being their neighbor, but I saw the cuts, scars, and bruises that had been left on their young bodies, and how their moods had changed afterwards from bratty little kids to completely silent and somewhat oppressed. Story 14. This one wasn't really a planned revenge, but it's still one I feel guilty about whenever I think about it. When I was a kid, I was extremely easy to scare with jump scares, and I hated them. I would always enter fight or flight mode whenever something stupid jumped out at me, and then I'd be mad as hell afterward. When my buddies caught on to this, they made it their business in life to jump out at me and scare me any chance they got. Despite my hate of being scared, I was a huge fan of Halloween, and I had a Halloween party every year either close to or on the big day. Naturally, this was the night when all my friends would do their damnedest to scare me so bad that I would bolt and run. They succeeded a few times when we were all under 9 years old, but something shifted in me the year I turned 10, and none of us knew it until it was too late. As usual, I had my big Halloween party. As usual, all my buddies were there. And as usual, one of them wanted to try and scare the pants off of me. About midway through the evening, I went down the hall to use the restroom, and while I was in there, my friend, I'll call him Aaron, scampered down the hall after me and hid in a darkened doorway. I came out of the restroom, started down the hall, and Aaron jumped out at me and grabbed my arm. Ordinarily, something like this would have made me bolt like a little chicken crap, but for some reason that night, the flight side of my fight or flight got turned off. The moment he grabbed me, I whirled around and punched him square in the face without even thinking about what I was doing. It was all pure instinct, and after impact, I realized what I'd just done and freaked out. Aaron wrenched his mask off and was clutching his face and groaning, or so I thought, and I yelled for my dad, concerned I had really hurt my friend. My dad and all my other friends came running down the hall to find out what had happened. My dad flipped on the hallway light, and what greets us? Aaron, with his face covered in blood. I'm instantly horrified, thinking I busted his nose, but as I'm spewing apologies to him, I begin to realize he's not groaning. He's laughing. He grabs me by the hand I'd punched him with and yells, "What are you apologizing for? That was freaking awesome." And he yanked my hand up over my head like I was a boxing champ and starts telling everyone how cool it was of me to just haul off and slug him. If you haven't guessed, Aaron was a pretty cool kid. He thought it was great that I'd suddenly found the courage to defend myself. My dad helped get him cleaned up, though he insisted on keeping his now bloody costume on, and inspected his nose. Thankfully, it wasn't actually broken, but I still feel a wave of guilt when I remember the sight of his face covered in blood. I remember the feeling of my fist hitting him in the schnoz. I'll always be grateful to him for handling it so well, and encouraging me for standing up for myself, but I still feel so guilty about decking him that I can't even imagine how I would feel if I had actually broken his nose. You know, they say a prank is only as good as the person being pranked receives it, so this guy's being a great sport about it. Just roll with it. No need to feel guilty. What a great friend. Story 15. High school. Oh man, this poor kid I used to work with at Wendy's, Kevin, he was a juvenile delinquent. He was a few years older than me, a little bit bigger than me, had nasty tattoos on his neck, and supposedly was out of jail on work release. He tried to be a tough guy and bully me whenever we worked together. Stuff like generally talking smack unprovoked, getting real close up in my face, and that stance where you puff out your chest and pull your arms back like you're gonna swing. The most irritating was when he would walk straight up in my face, then flinch like he was gonna throw a punch at me, then just laugh and say some rude crap. I got along with just about everyone at work, and he did somewhat, but we just did not fit together. One day, the exchanges between us were so apparent and obviously stressed, everyone working was talking about me fighting him. I dispelled these rumors as I wanted to keep my job, but my destiny on this day said otherwise. First was the back door incident. The store had a large back door with a peephole in it, and it could only be opened from the inside. There was a buzzer outside that employees would push if they wanted back in. Well, Kevin was locked outside, and his patience while awaiting his re-entry had run out. Instead of tapping the buzzer, this guy was mashing it and holding it down while everyone inside went nuts. We're all busy, and I was running to the back to grab some heavy boxes. Holding these boxes, I was just going to open the back door while I walked past. I tried to push on the door, but it wouldn't open. I leaned into it, but couldn't push much more because the boxes I was holding. I was in a hurry, so I yelled, "Get back! I'm gonna kick the door!" He did not hear me over the loud, constant buzzing. I gave that door a swift, "This is Sparta!" kick, and it opened about 3 inches, then bounced closed again. WTF? I kicked it again, and it opened, revealing abashed and somewhat upset Kevin. He had been trying to look in the peephole when I kicked the door. I had just broken the crap out of his nose. Like, the tip was almost touching his cheek. Bright red purple, swollen eyes, broken. He was pissed. Immediately, I started apologizing and backing away from him, but he came at me like a rabid monkey. Quickly, we were surrounded by employees and separated. I was told to go up front and manage fries, and to not come into the back part of the store until Kevin left to the hospital. Then the final event. Less than 10 minutes later, I was working the fries, which entails grabbing a metal basket out of boiling hot oil and dumping the fresh fries into an adjacent tray. I was doing this, and everyone around me was talking about how I just broke Kevin's face. On his way, leaving our store for the hospital, he decided to come right up to me again and try to instigate a fight while I was dumping some fresh fries. Kevin pulled his signature move of flinching at me like he was going to throw a punch. I retaliated by returning my own flinch with the basket I was holding. I didn't actually hit him with an incredibly hot fry basket, but I forgot about the boiling hot oil still clinging to the basket. When I flinched at him and shook my basket, tiny flaming hot drops of grease splattered his face and neck. I had just broken his nose on accident, then threw boiling hot oil on his face on accident. Instant fight. On the ground, I'm a wrestler, so his freshly broken and burned nose was just smashed and wiped across a dirty floor for a few seconds before it was broken up. He was an absolute mess. He left for the hospital. I got sent home. That was it. No charges. No questions from my managers after, no more being scheduled with Kevin. Not even any paperwork about 2 vicious assaults and fights in the same day. I felt really bad, but simultaneously kinda justified. Both incidents were honest accidents, which could have easily been avoided if he weren't such a jerk. I still felt like the outcome was worse than reasonable. Story 16. My sister used to kick my ass on the regular. She had mad anger problems and would go berserk over the littlest things. One time, I turned the light on while she was trying to sleep. She beat me up, and I ended up going to prom with bruises all over me. All through the years, I never hit her back. I was a super sensitive kid, and if I ever hit back, I ended up crying to my mom about how I loved my sister and hated to hurt her. After I graduated, she had calmed down a bit, but she still had issues. Coming back from a small party one night, and she's back on her old bullcrap, just getting mad over something stupid and going totally crazy over it. We get home and get out of the car, and I say I'm driving home. She keeps saying I'm too drunk, even though I'd only had 2 to 3 mini beers. She grabs the back of my shirt, and I'm so pissed off at her, I turn around really fast with my fist out to hit her arm or something. She immediately lets out a blood-piercing scream and drops to the ground. Blood is spurting everywhere. She leaves a trail as she runs inside and wakes up our mom and dad. Turns out, I broke her nose pretty effing bad, but my mom and dad kept saying it couldn't be that bad because I had done it, and that she must have been really effing with me for me to have done something like that after all these years of her beating on me. I felt so awful. I cried and tried to say sorry, but she ended up going to the hospital. I don't feel so bad now because she purposely never paid the bill, thinking she could bully me into paying it, and she never lets it go. She always says I'm the reason her credit and stuff is bad, and that the reason she has collections agencies calling her over the ER bill. I ain't paying that crap. Consider it payment for the years of abuse. Story 17. I had a girlfriend cheat on me, lie about it when I confronted her, and gave her the chance to come clean and work through it, and stalk me after I broke up with her. We were quite young, 17, so it was all very overdramatic, but I did love her a lot and was hurt by what she said. At the time, I was very done and not interested in reconciling. She didn't get the hint. I asked her nicely many times, then not so nicely, then demanded she F off. She would for a while, but then she'd show up drunk and try and pick fights, insult me, and be sincerely hurtful. I eventually had enough, as you do. I told her a couple of choice people in her school, different to mine, what she'd done, with gory details. She'd sucked off her ex in his crappy car. Thought she'd get dragged for it, and that would be that. Well, turns out she was a female dog in all other aspects of her life, too. Apparently, she was loathed at school, and people jumped on this news like starving beasts on fresh meat. I had texts and IMs from people I didn't even know asking to confirm the news, which I ignored because I was really done with the whole situation by now. I eventually heard from other friends at that school that people had not let it drop, and had even stuck posters around the school with pictures of her, announcing what she'd done, offering her, services with her phone number, photoshopping bananas into her mouth, etc. It was brutal, and she had to change schools in her final year. I did feel a bit bad. If I'd known it would go that far, I might have rethought telling those people. At the same time, she hurt me badly. She refused to leave me alone despite months of chances, and the other students reacted so viciously because apparently she was a total a-hole to everyone in the school, so I don't know. I sure as hell didn't expect that, though. So, you just said it. The reason why she got shamed and bashed so badly isn't because she cheated on you. It's because she had a negative impact on so many other people as well. So, the way I see it, this is absolutely deserved. This is what you get for treating everyone you know like trash. And I don't feel bad one bit. Granted, I don't know the girl, but just based off of what was shared here, she deserves every bit of shaming she got. Story 18. Some girl hit my car in a hit and run. There was a witness to the crime, so the police were able to track her down. When I was asked if I wanted to press charges, I went for it. Turns out, she had no license or insurance. She kept trying to fight the charges, but wound up getting sued by my insurance, having to pay me restitution via the court system, and 4 separate charges between all her crimes, all of which included a decent fine. She was some 18-year-old single mom. I felt super bad by the end of it. Edit to add details. The damage wasn't significant. There was a small dent and a large scratch. It was all cosmetic damage. My deductible was small, but the total bill to my insurance was about $3,000. My car is over 10 years old and had some other scratches already. I was way more upset that someone hit me and drove off than I was about the actual damage. I wouldn't have even bothered to get it fixed if the girl hadn't driven off. My pursuing her and pressing charges was 100% fueled by revenge, and her life got pretty effed up from it. Yeah, what she did wasn't right, but I can empathize with her being a scared 18-year-old who made a bad choice while caught up in the moment. Also, I'm not justifying her behavior because she had a kid, but it does make me feel bad for her. Being a single parent, as a woman or man, is a really expensive thing, and having a bunch of fees on top of that financial burden has got to suck. Story 19. Had a lawyer a few years back who was a piece of absolute crap. 1. Would go months between returning phone calls. 2. Constantly late with court filings to the point the courts multiple times moved to have the case dismissed from lack of action. 3. Lied to me constantly about anything and everything. 4. Refused to be fired. Seriously, when I told him he was fired, he just ignored me and kept presenting himself as my lawyer. I had to get the courts involved to get him to stop. 5. Lied about me. Our client has been unreachable. We're considering dropping them. What? I tried to call you 84 times in the last 3 months and you didn't answer or return a single one. 6. When I finally did fire him, he told me I had to be in court on a specific date that didn't work for me, at a specific time that didn't work for me, or else the motion to withdraw wouldn't be accepted. So I got to the courtroom and the judge was super nice but confused as to why I was there, and when I told him the story, the judge goes, "Yeah, this is all done electronically. Not sure why your lawyer would tell you that other than to be a dick." Needless to say, by the end of all this, I was pissed and wrote a 10-page bar complaint about 4 different lawyers in their offices on ethical behavior. Well, the Bar Association decided this was a firm-wide encouraged pattern of behavior and threw the book at the 4 partners. Disbarred for 5 years, restitution to clients, and only allowed to practice under supervision for a period of 5 years after they return. I felt a little bad, but god damn, I was so effing sick of being jerked around. Story 20. In elementary school, there was a bully kid who would make fun of me. I had a bad bowl cut and was pretty small, so it wasn't surprising. Me and my friends usually just ignored him. Anyway, one day, this kid from Brazil moved into the house next to mine. He was a year older, and we used to play soccer together every day after school. I mentioned to him once that this kid would call me names and usually while walking home from school would follow behind me taunting me. One day, I'm leaving school and this kid is going slowly behind me on his bike shouting stuff. Just dumb kid stuff, you know? Brazil kid comes out of nowhere, knocks the kid off his bike and just starts beating him. Bully is on the grass crying and bleeding. Brazil kid grabs the bike and gives it to me. "You can keep this," and then walks away. I didn't know what to do. I just laid the bike next to the kid and walked home. He wasn't at school for like a week. Later in life, I found that kid had a really crappy home situation with abusive parents. I was 10 at the time. Always felt bad for that. Quit bullying me though. I still occasionally see that Brazilian guy. Don't think he even remembers it. Cool on him for helping in his way, I just think it went too far. Story 21. During a rough patch with my now ex-fiancé, he admitted to me that he'd been cheating on me and was involved with someone else. At the time, he was a general manager of a company that was being sold, but none of the employees knew, as the company needed to be up and operating through the sale, at which time everyone would be out of a job, including him. But he was getting some big money for his efforts. So when he came clean about the cheating, I went out and got drunk with a friend. Came home that night and called everyone's voicemail and left a message with the details of what was happening to their jobs and the company. It was a complete mutiny the next day. Edit. From Cats Are Not Reptilians specifically, no, he did not build the company from the start. No, he did not lose a dime. No, his life was not ruined. He actually made out like a bandit. I made this post because I did think maybe I shouldn't have done that. And Cats Are Not Reptilians, thanks for your cutting psychoanalysis, even with the spelling and grammar errors. Story 22. 9th grade honors English class. The teacher didn't like me. Only teacher I ever had that didn't like me. Others would get frustrated with how my lack of effort at times, but still liked me as a person. She just flat out didn't like me. One of the reasons was that she didn't like athletes because they would miss her class regularly for travel for games. And I played 3 sports, so I was missing a good bit. Now, I was also missing for academic stuff like math/science competitions and quiz bowl tournaments, but she was particularly bothered about missing for sports. Case in point, she would intentionally double the amount of homework due the day after a long away games, knowing that the players wouldn't have the time to finish it all. And shocker, she didn't check homework every single day, but always checked after away games. I've written about her before, but she would also give me 70s and low 80s on papers without any red marks on them, but the people around me would have red marks all over their paper and would have 90s. After one particularly low grade on an assignment I knew that I had actually done really well on, I inquired about it. Her exact response was that I was only doing 70% of my ultimate capability, and the others were doing 90% of theirs. So I specifically asked, "Does that mean my paper can be better than someone else's, but be 20 plus points lower?" And she said yes. And to show this wasn't just me misunderstanding things, she recommended me for an advanced writing class a year earlier than students were supposed to be able to take it. So if those two things weren't bad enough, she gave us an opportunity for extra credit towards the end of the year. We had to go to a local college's rendition of Antigone, write a 2,500-word paper on it, and tie it into what we discussed in class on the play, and also turn in our ticket and playbill. It was due on a Monday, and the play was only going on Friday through Sunday, so there was no way to turn it in ahead of time. But I was going to miss class that Monday all day for an academic competition, representing the school, and it was the biggest one of the year, had to place top 10 in a previous competition to qualify, so it's obviously an excused absence. I told her for an entire week prior to the play that I was going to miss on Monday, and she told me multiple times to turn it in first thing Tuesday morning. So I go to the play, write the paper, go to the academic competition Monday and place first in one category and second in another, and then Tuesday morning, before basketball workouts at 7 a.m., I go to her room to turn in the assignment. She refuses to take it because it's late. And she didn't recall ever suggesting that I could turn it in on Tuesday. She told me 4 times. Her reasoning? 1. Another student that missed for the competition was able to turn it in, but that student lived across the street from the school. I lived 20 minutes away and couldn't drive. 2. My mom was a teacher at the school, so I could have just sent it with her, except I had been told to turn it in on Tuesday, so there was no reason for me to think to have my mom turn in my assignment for me. Plus, she has her own students and classes to worry about. 3. I could have done the work Monday evening, which wouldn't be fair to the other students, so I went into the metadata for the paper that showed the last time it had been saved was Saturday afternoon. She still refused to grant me any credit for it, so I was out the $25 for the ticket, the time that it took, plus it really inconvenienced my mom who had to pick me up Friday from practice, rush me home to shower and change, then rush me back downtown for the play, and then come pick me up again 2 hours later. So my mom was pretty pissed about it too. This teacher also prided herself on the fact that nobody had ever made an A on her final exam. She thought she was the toughest teacher ever. Really, she just loaded students up with a bunch of busy work. So the last day of class, she gave a few minutes at the end of class and asked, "What's your biggest wish?" to the class as a whole. I piped up, "I wish for an A on the exam." And she laughed and said, "Yeah, and I wish for $1 million and not to have to deal with you anymore." So all of that sets up the final exam. It's 100 questions and then a 5-point bonus question that asks those generic, what was your favorite part of the class, what did you learn, etc. We got 2 hours to take the exam, and students that finished early had to wait until 1 hour was up so that there was just 1 point of people getting up and leaving rather than being distracting throughout. So I finished the 100 questions in about 20 minutes. So I spent the remaining part of the hour just blasting her in the bonus question. I said that I'm not sure I learned anything and pointed to her never making any comments on how to improve my writing. I said that my favorite part of the class was it finally being over and not having to deal with her crap anymore, and brought up a number of other things that happened on top of that mentioned above. And I said she was by far the worst teacher I ever had and that the school is worse off with her teaching the entire 9th grade. The bell rings for the hour and I'm the only person of the entire 110 students to leave at the hour mark. Now, on exam days, the teacher doesn't proctor their own exam, so that they're available to answer questions or if the classes are split among different rooms. So I have to wait for my mom to finish proctoring a different exam, so I'm just sitting out in the breezeway. The teacher finds me, holding my exam with tears in her eyes, and tells me to meet her in the principal's office. She then storms off, so I head over. As I'm waiting there, I recount what happened to the soccer coach who's sitting there because he made some comment about, "Surprised to see you sent in here." Eventually, she comes back with my mom, who she pulled out of proctoring an exam, and we all go in to see the principal. She's crying, screaming, literally choking every minute or so. After about 45 minutes of me spilling everything I'd gone through that year, all things I'd already vented to my mom about plenty of times, the principal finally looks at her and goes, "How much was the question worth?" She said 5 bonus points, and he says, "Then just don't give him the bonus points." So I made a 98 on the final instead of a 103. Missed 2 questions. Every other student got the bonus points, and the next highest grade was an 81. Thinking she would get the last laugh, I noticed a few days before grades were due that one of my assignments from the second week of class, all the way back in August, had been dropped 10 points. My final grade ended up being a 94.4, which was a B at the time, but I couldn't prove she had altered my grade. I just had them all in a spreadsheet to determine my grade ahead of time. should have been a 95.2, but nothing that would prove anything. Since I could have just typed it wrong, I didn't. The summer after, the school decided to change to a 10-point scale, and so 90 plus was an A. So my B became an A. She also had to have her homework assignments each week signed off by the department chair, and she had to start accepting assignments via email. 2 years later, she was fired after other students having real issues with her. Prior to me, the administration just thought it was a case of students complaining about the hard teacher. Still think she deserved every bit of it, but I certainly didn't think it would set in motion her getting fired. Though, again, she deserved it. Hopefully people are still reading. She sucked. So yeah, teacher definitely seems like a jerk, but what I'm trying to figure out, in what world and in what school do you have to score a 95 or higher to get an A? Bro, if you get a 94, that is an A all day long. 94.4, if you're getting a B for that, that is just absolute sacrilege. Horrible, horrible academic standards. Story 23. Had a homophobic teacher's assistant. One day, me and my friend are effing around. We had been close. Not love each other close, but calling each other love and darling was a normal greeting. When messing around, she sneered at us and said, "That's not right. Men shouldn't be like that to each other. God doesn't condone it," or something to that effect. Can't remember the exact words. Well, my friend happened to be gay and offended. I happened to be fairly camp and wanted to make a joke out of it to try and diffuse the situation. Only this testament continued and we got treated like dog crap by this person. So we did the logical thing. We made posters and created a homosexual club, handed out leaflets and put the posters everywhere. When we handed her our leaflet, she was in front of a lot of people and simply refused to come. We found it funny as F because F this female dog. Then the principal came around because he was interested in the club and the leaflet. Oh, and because there was a clause written in small writing that said, "We reserve the right to tell homophobic people to F off." We explained the situation to him and he warned us that he would look into it. End of the week, and we found out that this TA had not only been fired, but barred from working in any school again. My teacher, as it turns out, was batting for the other side, and had already reported this behavior to the principal in the past, just they needed more proof. I felt really bad over the weekend. I made a woman lose her job and her profession. Then on Monday I came in and every single teacher had a copy of my leaflet and was laughing their asses off, so the regret slowly wore off. Story 24. I was jealous of a kid in my senior year creative writing class, high school. We had to submit weekly fiction pieces, and everyone in class would read each other's stories and discuss in class. This guy never wrote his own pieces. He actually had the balls to submit short stories he found online. Our teacher was not technologically savvy and way too trusting of his students, so it was never obvious to him. The kid received glowing praise every week in class, and it infuriated a lot of people to sit there and watch the teacher gush over this fraud. I finally decided to do something and snitched. He was nailed for cheating and failed the class, resulting in a failing grade for his English requirement. This was problematic for him because he had applied early decision to one school, and it was now late in the senior year when he could no longer apply to schools. Because of a failing grade, this crushed his GPA, and somehow the university was also aware of the cheating. They reversed their admittance, and he had to spend a year at home. During that year at home, when he otherwise would have been at school, he was hit by a car and is now paralyzed from the neck down. Yeah, so this is one that I definitely feel bad about. All because it stemmed from a little bit of jealousy. I mean, yeah, he's cheating, but like, what does that have to do with you? You didn't really have to snitch on him and set off this chain reaction, this butterfly effect of events that not only got him kicked out of school, but yeah, I mean, you could argue that he wouldn't have gotten hit by that car if he was in school, studying, cheating, doing whatever. So yeah, that sucks. I'd feel bad about that. Story 25. Last year, I was driving on the service road. Not all states have them, but they run alongside a highway and allow drivers to get on and off of them. I was driving 50 mph, the speed limit, when some jerk comes flying up behind me going at least 70 mph. Instead of going around me, he gets right up on my tail, puts on his high beams, and honks his horn. I wasn't going to go any faster for their sake, but my turn was coming up anyways. I made sure to take the turn slow enough to pass them off. Luckily enough, they were making the same turn. When he got in the other lane to finally pass me, I sped up and acted like I wasn't going to let him pass. Of course, they sped up very quickly and I let off my gas. What they didn't know was that there was a major dip in the road coming up. They hit it full speed and came about 1 foot off the ground. When they landed, I saw sparks and their bumper was hanging off as they pulled over. I feel bad for baiting them into that because someone could have been seriously hurt, but at least the a-hole learned their lesson. Yo, that's funny as hell. I would not feel bad about that at all. Jerk off drivers that think they own the road, they need to be put in their place. It's only funny because no one was seriously hurt, but like the whole sparks flying and bumper falling off, that is frickin' funny. Story 26. Got a coworker fired for incompetence. My manager wouldn't do it, so I saved up 3 months of failures, just documenting them all. I then took this to my director and got the woman fired. She was very unqualified for the position we held and was an absolute idiot most days. She posted all sorts of crap about being an independent woman, how she was proud that she was able to support her 2 fatherless kids. She would often say things like, "If we didn't have a woman in this office, nothing would ever get done," after doing something like changing the paper towel roll in the break room, which of course was something our cleaning staff was already paid to do. She just liked to do things she was actually capable of. One time, she was supposed to give a presentation at a hotel conference room and made it all the way past hooking up her laptop to the projector before she realized she didn't have the file on that laptop. It was only saved locally on her desktop in her office. You'd think we could just remote into it and grab the file? No, she's one of those retards who turns her enterprise workstation off. It was super embarrassing for our company. Story 27. In high school, would be late elementary in the US, I guess, there was this kid who wasn't unpopular per se, but a little awkward. Last day before the summer holidays, he plays with us during the morning break. Things get a little rough and there's some light wrestling involved. Nothing too serious, no one got hurt except some red ears, but the kid turned out to not be the silverback of our schoolyard. We walked back into class and continued the day as any other. Got on the bus home, he still being a little sour with the rest, started enjoying the summer holidays. Yay! A week later, my dad summons me into his study, fuming and enraged. He got a letter by the kid's dad, according to which I had beaten the boy up so badly that he came home sniveling. According to the letter, he was in so much pain that he could barely walk. The letter laid out in detail how the boy would not be able to enjoy the family trip they were going on the first day of summer, despite his grave injuries. I was expected to better come up with one hell of an injury, because otherwise we'd get fire and fury from the police and their lawyers. After some frantic back and forth shouting, my father eventually believed me that I didn't, in fact, beat the guy up. My father wrote a conciliatory letter to try and work out what precisely had happened. The other family wasn't having that, though, and began collecting statements from witnesses. Turns out that several teachers stated in writing that the kid appeared to be completely fine throughout the entire day, did not appear to be in distress or pain, and had interacted with them and other students completely normal. Whoopsie. The other family concluded that there had been a misunderstanding. I was pretty pissed at the guy because I seriously was expecting to get beaten up badly at home had this gone otherwise. So once school started, I waited until our entire male class was assembled and then told the story with appropriate snark to the rest of the class. Nasty snitch move. From that moment on, the kid spent years at the bottom of the hierarchy and was the butt of every joke for a long time. That time must have been really crap for him. I regret that deeply, because the kid was actually genuinely nice, if a little awkward, and grew up to be a pretty decent adult. And to his credit, once school started, he came to me and tried to explain the situation to me. The gist was that it were his overprotective parents who were the real trouble, not him. But I was so pissed because I could have gotten into so much trouble over nothing, just out of someone else's spite. But during the entire summer, I hadn't even gotten an apology or any admission of wrongdoing and was left doubting myself. There was also no attempt by the parents at getting us to talk to one another. That's deeply regrettable. I wish someone clever had helped us talk through that situation. Story 28. Told this one before, but here it is. This is 100% true, and I still feel like a dickhead to this day. Might not be revenge exactly, but felt like it. In middle school, I had a bully/tormentor we'll call Chuck. Chuck was about 2 years older than everyone else because he'd been held back twice. Chuck was a monster. Huge kid, especially since he was an 8th grader in 6th grade, and regularly tortured half the class. He picked on me most often out of the group, but everyone despised him. One day, after he grabbed me by the backpack and threw me against the lockers, I came home upset. My dad said, "Don't worry about him. Guys like that'll be changing your car's oil one day." Fast forward a month or so, and we're in art class. Teacher leaves the room, and Chuck starts laying into me and threatening to beat me up. I'd had enough, so replied with something like, "Fine, Chuck, I don't care, beat me up. No one here will laugh at me because you're bigger than all of us. You can beat up anyone in the room. Who cares? Do it. No one will give a damn." At this point, the class started getting my back and laughing, yelling insults at him. Still remember him looking panicked and saying, "Shut up, I'm sick of you talking, you're stupid." Since I had the support of the mob, I leaned into it and started telling him he was stupid. His parents hated him. He'd been held back twice because he was stupid, etc. Chuck was visibly shaking and about to start crying at this point. He had no power and the whole class was suddenly against him, so I went for the kill. "Don't care if you can beat us up, Chuck. You'll be changing my oil one day." After repeating my dad's line, I realized I effed up. Chuck was about to beat the crap out of me. Thankfully, the teacher walked back in the room a few seconds later, saw the commotion about to start, and sent him to the other side of the room. Fast forward about 7 to 8 years. I was in my sophomore year of college and came home for the weekend. Took my car to the Jiffy Lube for an oil change. Everything was normal, but then Chuck walks into the lobby holding my car's air filter. "Sir, this is pretty cracked with dirt. Do you want a new one?" I don't think Chuck recognized me, but I realized he was literally the tech changing my oil. Seeing him as beaten down as he was, working in a hot effing oil change shop in early summer made me feel horrible inside. Story 29. Junior year in high school, we had gathered at a friend's house to play some D&D. Someone had brought a 2-liter Coke bottle that had been filled with tequila. We had mostly ignored the alcohol and focused more on the game. All but one of us had kept our drinking reasonable. One guy had decided to get completely sloshed. He was stumbling around, being obnoxious, and making lots of racket. Friend's mom was in her room, and then he started puking. We took him outside, but he kept coming back in the house and throwing up on the carpet. We had finally had enough of his crap and decided to take him home. We loaded him into the back of my friend's pickup and took him to his house. It was late and his parents were asleep. We opened the door and pushed him in. We could see him kinda stumbling across the living room, through the front window. One of my friends was like, "You know what? F him," and started ringing the doorbell and pounding on the front door. Our drunk friend stopped and faced us, with a look of absolute horror on his face. We all hopped in the pickup bed and sped off. As we were driving away, we could see lights coming on all over his house. 16 years old, drunk as crap and wearing vomit-covered clothes. His parents were less than happy. We didn't see him for a long time. We probably should have just went outside with him, locked the door, and stayed with him until he had settled down and sobered up a little. Kinda felt sorry for him after his parents had gotten through with him. Story 30. During middle school, me and my best friend at the time were playing poker or some other card game involving gambling. There was some sort of disagreement, and I was certain that he owed me money. He felt like he didn't owe me anything. At some point, I was told by someone else that he was not going to pay me because I was the kusipa, rough translation, a-hole. I got mad, and because I had known him well for years, I knew a lot of stuff about him. I started to use this info to turn everyone against him. This, in turn, made it a popularity contest, which I won, mainly because I was the bigger a-hole and had no problem spilling everything I knew about him to all I knew, with some added stuff to further humiliate him. In the end, he was bullied by most people he used to consider friends. I later found out that he needed some therapy during those times. Always went straight home after school, which was not typical behavior for him or most kids in my country during middle school. Especially for him because, like me, he was part of the popular kids. Years later, I've apologized to him and we became friends again. Our lives headed to different directions, but we still see each other every now and then. This is pretty much the only thing I regret in my life. A feud over a few euros turned my friend's life into misery for a couple years. I'm just glad he pulled through, but even though he forgave me, I don't think I can ever forgive myself. Story 31. Have to go all the way back to 2nd grade for this, so I'm not sure how it was at your elementary school, but in ours, birthdays were a big deal. Usually involved the kids' parents coming in with sweets and goodie bags and everything. In my class, there was a super annoying devil child, which I'm convinced was spawned by Satan himself. Let's call her Miley. Miley was as bad of a kid as there ever could be. Talking back to the teacher, never doing her work, insulting how poor she thought the other kids were, and resorting to physical violence against everybody, especially the other boys. She knew that she could get a pass just because she was a girl, and for some reason the teacher never really seemed to pick up on how horrible she was. There was something particular about this little Hannibal Lecter, though. Lambs. She was absolutely obsessed with little white lambs. They were her favorite animal. She had them everywhere. Book bag, temporary tattoos, notebooks, t-shirts, etc. Some of you can instantly see where this is going. Being from a Persian family, our diet consisted of a fair amount of lamb. And it was around this fact that my best friend at the time, let's call him Josh, and I hatched a plan. We'd both gotten sick of Miley, but my birthday was coming up. Instead of asking my mom to bring over cupcakes, her usual routine, I asked my dad to cook some authentic Persian kebab kubide, so I could have my favorite meal at school. Being the only brown kid in my class, I think I passed it off as a cultural enrichment exercise. The trap was set. On my birthday, we all stayed in for lunch, and my dad brought over a huge tray of kebab. It was a huge hit. Kids were scarfing these things down like there was no lunch for the rest of the week. I distinctly remember looking over at Miley, who just finished her first one. Josh wanted to set the final stage of the plan into action, but I held off. I wanted her to eat more. The best part? She was wearing a pink t-shirt with a picture of a lamb on it. I remember thinking at the time why she hadn't asked anyone what meat it was, as it was obviously a red meat. It now occurs to me that she just figures it's beef, and that to spare her feelings, her parents have never told her that people actually eat lamb. We waited until she had eaten 3 kebabs. She pushed the paper plate away from her. Seemingly, she was done with her meal. Josh and I launched the final stage. We both walked up close to her table, and Josh asked me, "Say, OP, that's some good kebab. How'd you even make such a thing?" And in the most obviously fake TV announcer voice I could, I said, "Well, it's easy. You just take a lot of beef and an equal part of lamb meat and mix it all together." Miley's eyes got wider than I knew eyes could get. She turned and asked me what I said. Josh simply told her that it was made from that and pointed to the little lamb on her shirt. The reason why I regret this revenge choice so much is because in that moment, I still remember watching her soul crumble. As horrible as she was still just a kid. Her eyes welled up immediately as she looked at the remains of her plate, then back down at her shirt. That's when the crying started. And when I say crying, I mean bawling. And when I say bawling, I mean inconsolable. She cried so loud, I remember the teacher being mortified, shaking her by the shoulders and asking her what was wrong. She had no words, just more tears. At the time, I hate to admit, I was loving it. But now, all this time later, it still bothers me what I chose to do. You might think I'm being too hard on myself. After all, she was never in physical danger like in other stories in this thread. But what will always stick with me is the fact that this all happened around lunch. She was whisked off to the office where I was leaving at 3 p.m., and I could hear her crying. And she was never the same after that either. Not as mean, sure, but I don't think I saw her smile even once for the rest of the year. Her family ended up moving away that summer. I'm sure it was unrelated, but that just means I never saw her again. TLDR. Girl is mean, girl loves lambs, I fed her lamb. Story 32. I was a swimmer and water polo player in high school. For those that aren't familiar with water polo, it's a pretty rough sport, and suit grabbing is pretty common if you play whole set, center, as it allows you to control the other player's hips, which is enormous in positioning. This one guy was going way too far and actually reaching down my suit and grabbing my nuts and crap, so I got pissed and yanked his suit so hard that it ripped at the seams on the side. It was a little Speedo. It fell off of him and he had to get out of the pool naked in front of all the parents, coaches, refs, and athletes, with only his hands to cover himself. Story 33. Throwaway account made because I'm guilty about this. When I was in the 2nd grade, 7 or 8 years old, I was playing alone with a football that I had brought with me to my brother's middle school football game. A 15-year-old kid, who was the brother of a kid in the opposing team, came up, stole my football, pushed me over, and spit in my face. About an hour later, 3 of my fellow 7-year-old friends who were in my class, and also had older brothers on that team, showed up and we devised a plan to get the ball back. So we all ran up to this kid on the field behind the school and basically attacked him and got the ball back. But we didn't stop there. From there, we proceeded to basically beat the crap out of this kid. We were pulling his hair and punching him in the back while we held him down. At one point, one of my friends held his nose, so he had to open his mouth and then spit a loogie directly in his mouth while the rest of us held him down. This was really quite effed up. I still feel terrible about it. Again, no need to feel bad. First of all, you're in the 2nd grade. You're 7 or 8 years old. Like, what 15-year-old just punks on little kids like that? So for you guys to band together, strength in numbers, jump this guy, and then, stick it to him, he absolutely deserves that. And I guarantee you he didn't punk little kids anymore after that. So don't feel bad. You did all little kids and future little kids throughout the world a massive favor with that win. Story 34. Over a decade ago, when I was a teenager, we used to have bonfires out in a secret spot in the woods. One night we went out there and another group we didn't know also came through. They seemed nice and were doing their own thing most of the night. It was a big open space, so our groups stayed mostly separate. We brought 2 30 racks for about 6 people, so we obviously didn't end up finishing all of it. So we got up and left around 1 a.m., while the other group was still there. We get out to the woods and into our car, only to immediately see 3 of the guys from the group emerge from the woods. They blocked our car off and demanded we give them our beer or they'll kick our ass. The driver laughs in the guy's face, drops into gear, and peels out toward them. They jump out of the way. We get away laughing and yelling insults at the idiots. Well, we're teenagers with chips on our shoulders, and somebody had wronged us. So we went back and smashed out every window and headlight of the main guy's decked-out VW Jetta. We later found out that he was friends with a few mutual acquaintances. He told them about the incident at a party, conveniently leaving out the fact that they attempted to rob us, and said it cost them upwards of $2,000 because they had no insurance. Our revenge was definitely way out of proportion, but I still don't really feel bad. That guy was trash. Story 35. I was friends with this girl since we were 11. She was kind of awful, but I still hung out with her. She tried to embarrass me in front of our friends and was always trying to tell me what to eat and what to wear. It was weird. When we were in our mid-20s, she finally found a guy suitable for her and her family. Rich, same religion, rich, etc. And got engaged. I don't know why, but she really wanted to swing even though her fiancé didn't really want to do it. But he went along with it. It was a disaster. She got hers, he didn't get his. They fought. She still insisted on seeing the other dude to swing with him. It was just a mess. Anyway, one day we got into this huge fight because she didn't approve of my new boyfriend and whatever. I was so fed up with her and her crap that I told my mom, who happened to be very good friends with her mom, about the swinging, knowing my mom would tell her mom. It just spiraled out of control and everyone in her family found out. Her fiancé, who was such a nice dude, was so embarrassed and I guess just didn't think about how it would affect him. I still feel bad for that guy. I really hope he got a prenup. Story 36. Great. The one time I have something to contribute, it's about a time when I went too far being an a-hole. Oh well. When I was in 5th grade, I was picked on by some bully in my class. Nothing physical, just dumb crap like making fun of me and calling me names, etc. Certainly nothing that warranted what I did to him. I still feel disgusted about doing it to this day, but this was my revenge plot. There was a rumor going around that his parents were physically abusive, because he didn't like to go home after school and he would come to class with bruises and whatnot sometimes. The guy was really not bright and was easy to anger, so one day I started talking crap to him. I laid it on thick, and when he got to the point where he was visibly shaking from anger, I started saying stuff like, "What are you going to do about it? You going to hit me? I bet you're too chicken to hit me." And sure enough, he punched me square in the face, bloodied my nose pretty good. Immediately after he hit me, I smiled and told him, "I bet you're going to get suspended. I wonder what your parents are going to think about this." The look of horror on his face when I said that and he realized he fell right into my trap honestly haunts me to this day. After he got back from suspension, he never said a word to me again. Story 37. This kid who was one of my good friends since preschool decided that I was better for picking on than being friends with when we got to high school. He would say all sorts of vile crap to try and get a reaction out of me, especially in front of people that he thought were cool kids. He'd sneakily draw swastikas and racist crap in my notebooks, and then one day when I went to flip onto the page for a fresh sheet of notebook paper, bam, lab partners or teachers see and give me the weird looks. At some point, he said some terrible crap about my mom and another friend had to physically restrain me from killing him in history class. I calmed down and realized I was letting things get out of hand, and if I wasn't careful, I was going to get myself in trouble. I needed a more nuanced and subversive approach to my problem. Needless to say, this kid was not doing well in school. He wasn't a total idiot, but he was too busy smoking weed and being an a-hole to get his schoolwork done on time. Anyway, he's failing a few classes and decides to make a concerted effort to pass. His hardest class is chemistry, which I happen to be in with him. I see my chance. I offer to help this repugnant son of a female dog study and take notes in chemistry for a big, important upcoming project. In his eyes, I'm like a pathetic beta dog in his pack, desperate for the approval of my leader. Despite all the emotional torment he put me through, he still doesn't think twice about taking help from someone with seething, fiery hatred coursing through his veins, being driven on by the thought of sweet revenge and the eventual subjugation of his enemy. We fill his notebook up. I essentially do his project for him, encouraging him, feeding his ego, assuring him he's going to pass and maybe even with a fairly good grade. And then the day before the project is due, I steal that loathsome bastard's notebook, complete with his entire project inside, and ceremonially burn it in my garbage can in the alley behind my house while pumping Led Zeppelin's version of How Many More Times on my uncle's hand-me-down vinyl player as loud as my crappy speakers would go. Rarely in my life have I felt so much pleasure as I did watching him stammering to the chemistry teacher that he swears he had his notebook with his project yesterday, and watching the teacher, basing his judgment on what a terrible and careless student this kid has been all year, basically tell him he thought he was full of crap and that if he didn't have the project, he failed. He did fail, and then not long after, he dropped out, and subsequently, his life went down the proverbial tubes. Most importantly, though, this is probably a bad submission for this post because it's a very good amount of time later, and I'm still not sorry. Story 38. Not exactly a tale of revenge, citizen, as I uphold the law and exercise my rights as an officer to eliminate threats to society if peaceful resolutions are no longer an option. In high school, 2 classmates were killed by a train they were attempting to speed past. Some of their friends decorated their lockers the next day, as friends do, because they cared about them and loved them. They were not some of the popular teens in the school, and one of the uptight, preppy girls complained to the principal that their lockers shouldn't be decorated because they didn't do anything for the school, which, who cares? But since her family was a pillar of the community, she got her way and the vice principal had the decorations taken down. I was in the office doing TA things when this went down, and when the girl left to go back to her class, I left with her and stopped her down in the hallways and asked her what her problem was with people grieving and losing a friend. She said they weren't important and no one cares. I told her I hope she had to suffer losing people close to her suddenly, like our classmates, and I wouldn't feel sorry for her. Then I told her I hoped she'd get AIDS. About a year later, her mom discovered she had a brain tumor, which killed her within a year. Her grandparents also died in a house fire the same year. Feel bad for the family. Never felt bad for her. Story 39. Using a throwaway because I know they use Reddit and I'm still in touch with a few of them, and they never actually found out what I did. So, several years ago, when I was in university, I lived in a shared house with 6 other girls. The kitchen was a shared space, and we all had little colored stickers to mark our stuff so that we wouldn't use each other's things by mistake. I always made sure to have fresh fruit, cheese, and other things in my section, and spent a little extra for those luxuries. I had hoped that everyone would respect each other's things, but without fail, all my stuff would slowly disappear without me eating/using it. At first I figured, whatever, it's just a bit of cheese, I'll let it go. But it got to the point where my stuff would be gone by the end of the week after just buying it. I did talk to all of them and asked politely to not eat my stuff without asking, unless they wanted to go half and half on the cost. It didn't stop, so I decided that if they were going to eat my stuff and not care, then I'd get payback in my own way. It started out pretty vanilla, the usual licking stuff/dropping it in the garbage, and when that didn't do it for me, I started getting creative. I did some effed up stuff, but the worst of it was putting a bunch of dried and dead bugs into a chip dip and mixing it in, and the one I feel most guilty about was having my boyfriend at the time self-pleasure into my bottle of ranch. Sure enough, within 4 to 5 days, the bottle was nearly gone. They never found out about any of it. I felt justified in my actions at the time, but when I look back, it was definitely wrong. I could have gotten someone sick. Definitely not something I'm proud of, and would handle my frustration differently if I could go back and do things over. Story 40. So, back in junior high, one dude, for the sake of the story, we'll call him Werner, who was in the same math class as me and was a continuous ass to everyone, but often to me specifically, after some months I decided I had enough. I went to a really active turtle/tortoise online forum, and in the subsection for buying and selling the animal/equipment, I posted a message that went something like this. Hi, I'm looking to start my turtle hobby. I need everything to start and a turtle, maybe several. My budget is pretty big and I'm willing to buy a whole terrarium as well. I'm best reached by phone on Monday through Friday between 12 to 4 p.m. Kind regards, Werner. Werner's mobile number. Basically, I expected him to get a few calls during the school hours and get his mobile confiscated a couple of times, but what followed was an absolute onslaught of people trying to sell their turtles and equipment to him. His phone was ringing constantly during the afternoon, and he started to get more and more irate with this. Often started screaming to the people trying to sell their stuff to him. Then, finally, one math class, he gets a call. It's about a turtle. He completely flips out and smashes his phone and goes completely mental. The teacher can't get him to calm down and he shoves the teacher. This leads to him getting kicked out of the course, mandatory therapy and anger management, and he had to repeat the grade because of the math course. Sure, he was an ass, but he didn't deserve to lose a year of his life due to that. To this day, he has no idea how the phone call started. Story 41. About 8 years ago now, I had a fiancée who had moved from Wales to Scotland to be with me. She wasn't very happy at first, but I thought it was just nerves about being away from home. First time living with a partner, etc. Well, she goes back to Wales about once a month, staying for a weekend at a time. I trust her, nothing suspicious about that. Cut to a few months later, we've been living together for about 6 months. few teething problems, a couple of arguments here and there, but on the whole, I thought we were very happy together. Well, one night we go out and get blazing drunk, as first-year uni students all want to do. Come back to the flat and she passes out. I'm eating my takeaway when my phone buzzes. I check the text and see some random guy saying, "Babe, did you get home all right? Have you told him yet?" Haha, thinks drunk me. Some arsehole has texted the wrong number. And then I notice the case on the phone. I never had a pink case. Fiancé did, though. It took a few minutes for the realization to penetrate my drunken stupor, but when it did, oh boy. I read through all the messages. She'd been sleeping with a mutual friend of ours back in Wales every time she went down there. Full-blown affair. And that night, she was supposed to tell me everything and end things with me so she could move back to Wales and be with him. Have you ever been so angry a cold haze descends on you? I've heard of the red mist, but those texts took me to another, altogether more terrifying level of anger. I considered my options and decided that texting him was the best option going forward, which would have been bad enough, except this mutual friend of ours had recently been undergoing treatment for cancer, and in the cold fury that possessed me, I knew exactly what I had to say. I can't remember the exact body of the text now, but it's essentially boiled down to, "You're a scumbag. You use your condition to emotionally blackmail her into being with you, and if anyone deserves to have cancer, it's you." Needless to say, the next morning, those texts triggered what is perhaps the most volatile breakup I've ever endured. Full-on screaming matches. Her alternating between calling me despicable for what I said and apologizing profusely for betraying me. It was a strange time. The other guy took it real hard. He spiraled into a depression, became real controlling of her. She moved back to Wales and moved straight in with him. I heard from other mutual friends that their relationship was really strained by the whole thing, because he couldn't shake the thought that what I'd said in a drunken rage was even in some way true. Anyway, he survived, and they have 3 kids together, and they seem happy. But goddamn, for a while there, I genuinely thought I was going to be the deciding factor in a cancer patient's self-unaliving. Story 42. When I was a kid, there was a girl at my school who was really weird. She never spoke above a whisper and had a super overprotective mom with these freaky, giant, long nails who she'd always rat people out to. If you cross this girl in any way at all, her mom would be outside the fence at lunchtime and wave you over and tear you a new a-hole. It got to the point where even her friends were kind of terrified, because if you so much as cheated at hopscotch, or whatever 7-year-old girls were playing at the time, I forget, there was the terrifying mom waiting for you. Eventually, she threatened to tell her mom on me for something tiny. I don't even remember what. I avoided her as best I could. Must have been some insignificant interaction, like I took her coat or some crap. So I started telling everyone she was evil and to avoid her, and people actually did. This girl ended up with practically no friends except for one other girl. Things kind of evened out, but from then on, everybody was even more on eggshells around this girl, and most people chose not to interact with her at all for fear of her mom. In hindsight, that mom was probably so overbearing that her kid never learned to interact for herself, but I don't think I really changed anything so much as made people realize that, yeah, the best way to avoid the mom was to avoid the daughter. Last I heard, the girl was in university and had a reputation for being super quiet, but seemed normal enough. Story 43. I dated a girl from Vietnam who made it clear she was in a fake marriage for a green card with a guy, and sometimes had to hang out with him to keep him happy and playing along. She was very degrading and treated me horribly almost all of our relationship. I was in a bad point in my life and decided to just take it. I caught her staying over his place one night and realized she'd been effing and sleeping with this guy the whole time. I also realized her phone was on airplane mode every single time we hung out. She always hung out one-on-one with her friends' boyfriends. I always thought it was weird, but never said anything. My intuition was screaming at me that something was up, but I ignored it. After we broke up and I got out of my depression, I realized how much of an idiot I was and how I let this girl take advantage of me financially and emotionally. Months after we broke up, I met an amazing girl who I'm still with today and probably will be forever. Despite this, I was still emotionally scarred from what this girl put me through, and I needed revenge to be at peace. I made an anonymous Facebook account and messaged the friend and said, "Your boyfriend is effing," insert X's name. This friend of hers was the one who set her up with the fake marriage, took care of all the paperwork, and set her up with the immigration lawyer. Whatever transpired the following months after that, I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that her brother, and his girlfriend moved out of the house they were in and left the country. They were all currently in college and had big dreams of making a living in America. Story 44. caused a kid in middle school to go to the hospital. He was a bully-type kid named Timmy. He didn't seem to want any friends, always picked on everyone, and generally just seemed to hate everyone. During recess, about half the class was playing throw the ball back and forth. He made it his mission to intercept the ball and then kick/throw it away from everyone, sometimes on the roof. On one throw, the football bounced off his head during a missed intercept, and I went over to get the ball and said, "Ha, you didn't get it." Well, Timmy launched into an uppercut and caught me right in the nose. The recess bell rang and he ran inside. Immediately following recess, we had art class together, where I would get my revenge on Timmy. This week in art, we were working on clay sculptures. I started creating a sculpture of a tower with a staircase that swirled around the base all the way up to the top. The thing is, I put one of those 3-inch steel T-pins inside the base tower, pointing up. Tim was walking by my table, and as planned, I said, "Hey Tim, I bet you won't smash my sculpture." He took the bait. With a crooked smile, he raised his fist into the air. That's when time slowed down, and I immediately regretted my trap, realizing that it was probably a bad idea. It was too late. Tim slammed his balled fist down onto the table, smashing the clay sculpture. His face instantly turned ghost white and his eyes were wide open. It was so odd, though, that he didn't cry out in pain, but only grabbed his hand and ran. He was out of school for a long time. I don't remember how long, but what I do remember is that when he got back, he had a cast on his hand. But he never said anything to anyone about it. Not to me, other kids, or teachers. Nothing happened to me, and I don't know why. Either he felt too stupid to say exactly what happened, or he figured I wouldn't get in trouble. Story 45. Not so much as revenge, though it was a response to something I didn't like, to make me feel better, and I will regret it all my life. My dad had cancer off and on. It came back while I was living with him and his girlfriend and her kids in Massachusetts, 2009 or 2010. Me and her kid, Ethan, 2 years younger than me, did not get along. He was a pathological liar and always told his mom stuff, and she would tell my dad and get me in trouble. My dad had never abused me, ever, aside from spankings when we lived in Texas with my mom, for which I deserved and made me not a craphead. Well, one day Ethan tells his mom I did something, which I can't remember, and while in the garage alone, my dad came up to me and grabbed my shirt collar and yanked me. I was almost off the ground. This was the most aggressive physically he'd ever been with me, and he was yelling about what I'd done, which I hadn't done. My memory's a little hazy, but I'm pretty sure Ethan owned up to lying after finding out what happened, and the next day, my dad apologized via text while I walked to the school bus. I replied saying, "I hope you go paralyzed." The cancer started out in his testicles and moved into his spine up high over the years, up to this point. So this was possible and a thought that could happen. I think he replied saying, "I love you," or something similar, but I could tell he probably cried or it hurt him really bad. I didn't talk to him for the rest of the day. Over time, things went back to normal and we were chill, and I eventually moved back to Texas with my aunt or mom, and he eventually after that did as well for chemo. The years went by, like 3, and we had been on great terms by now, and I saw him almost every day as I lived with my uncle, his best friend, and life was fairly normal apart from his cancer. Well, he passed away in 2013, and I always remember the thing I texted him and never apologized for, and I get pretty sad about it a lot, and still regret ever saying it. 6 months later, the same year, my mom passed, and I was just a depressed kid. This response probably doesn't fit in this question, but I wanted to vent about it, so sorry if this story isn't that great, lol. Story 46. In my second year at uni, we had a housemate that we all liked to pull pranks on. He was insanely tall and liked to act like the alpha male, so we had to bring him down a peg or two. One day, he's asleep, and my housemate says he's going to go into his room and throw a cup of water on him. For once, I felt bad for him, so I said I wasn't going to partake. 5 minutes later, my housemate runs back into his room, giggling, and locks the door, to which I say, "I guarantee you he's going to think it was me and mess with my room instead." Lo and behold, 5 minutes later, I hear the door to my room open and close, so I walk in there and find an entire bucket of water upturned on my bed. At this point, I'm pretty pissed because I had nothing to do with the original prank. So I go downstairs to the kitchen, find a huge dish bucket full of old dirty plates and cutlery, swimming in chunks of mold where the plates had been set festering in it for at least a month, carried it to his room and threw it over his head, covering him not only in moldy water, but also some cutlery that I had failed to remove. As a result, I accidentally broke one of his PS4 controllers. He had to go take a long shower to wash the residue off himself, and the room smelled so bad that he had to sleep in the lounge for the next 2 weeks. Story 47. Okay, so this one is probably going to get buried under a ton of dislikes because my pettiness almost got someone killed. Anyways, here it goes. Some 12 years or so ago, I was a complete loner in class, minding my own business and doing well with almost all subjects, not really caring about anyone else and spending pretty much all my time alone. A new year rolls around and the classes get hard. Like really effing hard, because the dean changes and reforms everything. At this point, I'm still doing my own thing. Doing great and pretty much acing everything that came my way. Here, a cute chick approaches me and begins asking me for help with classes and whatnot, and I oblige and help her raise her marks for most of everything. Around a month later, she's separated from her little group of friends. I hadn't realized this yet, being as dense as a neutron star with zero social skills. As day goes by, and people in class begin to approach me and talk to me about how that chick is just making use of me, and that I should confront her and make her stay away from me. After the fourth or fifth person tells me that, I'm convinced. This female dog is taking me for a fool. How dumb I was. After the break, I confront her. I call her names and other hard stuff. She leaves crying and doesn't come to class anymore. A week later, police comes around to give us a talk about depression and bullying. Turns out, that girl tried to unalive herself and her mother made her change schools. Apparently, I was being bullied and given the ice treatment by the whole class, but hadn't realized up to that point. And the girl tried to be a good person to me, which in turn made her lose her friends and be bullied as well. And when I pushed her away, I broke the camel's back. Story 48. One time a kid punched me in the face at my first 8th grade dance because I said hello to his girlfriend. Then a few months later, he tried to fight me out front of the school to show off to his other druggy loser friends. Ended up shoving me into the side of a truck, which caused me to fall onto the side view mirror and snap it off. I never once talked to this kid and barely knew his name, but he humiliated the crap out of me twice now. Fast forward a few years, and we're all at a house party. He comes up to me out of nowhere and asks me for a cigarette. I think, is this effing guy really asking me for anything? So I told him no problem, but I had to run to my car to grab them. Be right back. I walked outside to the side of the house, stuck the filter tip of the cigarette on my butthole, came back in, and watched him smoke the whole thing. About an hour later, he's throwing up all over his stupid muscle-headed preppy kid's bathroom, Macklemore or something like that. And I thought it was my fault he was throwing up so bad, so I felt, honestly, just a very small amount of bad. Only to find out that he drank the water out of a goldfish bowl after being dared by his ex-junkie GF in a bid to do whatever she said and win her back. At that point, I thought about offering her a cigarette as well, but I think that couple has suffered enough. Nowadays, they have no teeth, still live at home, unemployed, in a toxic I'll unalive myself for you kind of relationship. Story 49. When I was 5, this kid Jeff and his friends would bully and tease me while I walked home from kindergarten. It was the 80s. One day, they were posted up next to a drainage ditch next to the walking path, and as I walked up, they started talking loudly about throwing me in the ditch. Luckily, there was another path that I could take, so I turned and started to walk away. But Jeff followed me and picked up a little rock and told me he had rock power, while looking like he was going to throw it at me. I said, "Oh yeah?" and threw my little windbreaker at him as hard as I could. This was very out of character for me, but I'd seriously had enough. The zipper hit him in the eye. He started crying, his friend started yelling at me, and I picked up my jacket and ran all the way home. I felt bad about it for a long time that I'd hurt him, but as an adult, I feel pretty vindicated. I was a kindergarten girl up against 4 or 5 first and second grade boys who were threatening to throw me in a ditch and throw rocks at me, and wouldn't let me leave the situation. They mostly left me alone after that. So I've said it before and I will continue to say it. There is nothing wrong with bullies getting their comeuppance, and the victim of the bullying, you shouldn't feel bad for finally clapping back. It's a lesson that needs to be learned and paid forward. So, nothing wrong, you did nothing wrong there. Story 50. Oh man, I just remembered this. I have another one. When I was again in public school, I think grade 7 or 8, my mom's friend had a kid who was going to start going to my school. Somehow I got tasked with babysitting this kid in the mornings before taking him over to the school. I forget how much younger he was than me. It was probably in grade 5 or 6 or something. Anyways, it started out fine. The kid was a little crap, but we would mostly just play video games before going to school. Except one day he was in the backyard playing basketball. I came out and told him it was time to go to school. He just straight up told me he wasn't going today and he was going to stay here and play video games. I was like, no, that's not happening. I'll get in trouble if I don't bring you to school. He starts arguing with me and then things escalate. Eventually he grabs one of those knuckle dog bones that we had for our husky, whips it at me. It smashes me in the face and I have a big gash on my face and bleeding like crazy. All I remember is being so mad at this kid, I chased after him, grabbed him, and literally WWE powerbombed him down onto the grass before going back into the house to clean up my face. I come back out after this happened, and he was still laying on the ground saying he couldn't breathe. I basically just completely knocked the wind out of him when I Batista bombed this kid into the ground. I felt pretty terrible about it since I've had the wind knocked out of me and I know how much it sucked. But I also knew how much my face hurt by receiving a knuckle bone straight to the head. I didn't do any more babysitting after that. Story 51. When I was young, there was always, for years, a hole in the back wall of our garage where bees were always flying in and out. I'd been stung several times over the years, and I guess I got fed up with it. One day, I decided it was a good idea to start throwing rocks at the hole, purely from anger at the bees. Well, as you can guess, the bees weren't too happy about my activity and decided to put an end to it and came after me. An hour later, I was in the ER in anaphylactic shock from the stings. I'm now allergic to bee venom. To set the stage a bit more, our garage wasn't attached to the house and was no longer used for cars. My dad had converted it to a lounge, complete with rotating, mirrored, multi-level liquor shelf, bar, pool table, shuffleboard table, couches, fully carpeted, nice sound system, nice pine paneling, full-on 70s, yes, this was in the 70s, look. Anyway, after coming home from the hospital 2 days later, I got it in my head that I wanted revenge on the bees. WCGW. This was towards the end of summer/early fall, and we had an 80-plus foot eucalyptus tree that grew right next to the garage near the hole, and was typical for the time of year. The ground was covered with eucalyptus leaves. I apparently decided it would be a good idea to pile leaves against the garage wall and smoke them out. It took me several hours to gather up the leaves, but eventually I got the pile up to the hole, which was about 5 feet from the ground, and started throwing lit matches at it. The resulting fire not only could be seen for miles as it engulfed the 80-plus foot tree, but the garage was decimated. The external siding of the rear wall was nearly completely ashed, and the roof was pretty messed up as well, but the interior was completely trashed by smoke damage and then by the firefighting efforts. Hundreds of bottles of booze, pool table, shuffleboard, couches, carpet, paneling, everything. And worse than just normal smoke, this was burnt honey. The smell lingered for years. When the firefighters ripped open the wall to ensure no embers were still burning, they found the remnants of the hive. It was floor to ceiling, 7 studs wide, thousands of dead bees. The overall damage wasn't covered by my parents' insurance because the fire was intentionally set. Needless to say, I didn't see too much daylight after that for quite some time. So, yeah. Arson. Whether you're a minor or not, I feel like that's not something that goes off of your permanent record, so I hope killing those bees was worth it. Story 52. I'm not a vengeful person, but my brother used to pick on me all the time growing up. He was 2 years older and always had 6 inches in height on me. I joined the military and came back from initial entry training. He thought he could still take me, but little did he know, I also studied and competed in combatives for 4 months. I choked him out in front of his wife. He's tried a couple more times throughout the years since then to take me on, but he had a son and I don't whip his ass anymore in front of him. A similar situation occurred with my best friend. He'd been active duty and on 2 deployments. I'd been on none and was part-time military, so he thought he was much better at fighting than me. I'm having a party and he keeps trying to fight with me. Now, my wife at the time was there along with other girls, whom of which I think he was trying to impress. I kept brushing it off until he grabbed me and knees me in the diaphragm. Same story as above, except I put his head into my dog's water bowl and told him to tap out. I always beg people not to push me. I never lose my cool, but I have special needs strength when I feel threatened. I have a lot of situations similar to these two, but I usually just hurt people's pride. Story 53. Ex cheated on me, so I blocked the gas card I was fronting for her, since she has credit issues, and waited. She calls me, frantic, wanting to know why she can't gas up her car. I tell her I'll call the gas company and find out. I wait 10 minutes, satanically giggling to myself, and then call her again. I lie to her and say the gas company wants her to pay up her bills since they've been on the card for a long time, but that after those are paid, they'll enable the card again. So she calls her just a friend and has him give her a ride home. Then she pays the outstanding fees on the card, and this is important to her because without her car, she can't go to work, and she has no money because she's a stupid female dog. So, a few days later, and she's panicking seriously hard because her employer started giving her less hours because she's been late more than once. I call the gas company and get confirmation that they've received the money. Then I tell them to cancel the card. I then go over to her the same evening and tell her that she's a dumb female dog for having cheated, and I thank her for paying her bills. She incredulously asks me, "Wait, does that mean the gas card thing was a lie?" I just laugh sinisterly and walk out of her apartment. So, aftermath was that she became seriously unpopular with her employer. She was transferred to another location where she now has to work in a ghetto pretty much. She commutes every single day for 3 hours or so. She's depressed and her economy is even worse than before since she isn't getting enough hours anymore. Somewhere down that line, I thought to myself, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Then I remembered she lied to my face and effed several guys behind my back. Nope, female dog deserved it. Story 54. I had a roommate in college who started dating this girl, and consequently had her move in. He never consulted any of the rest of us about it. If he had, we might have been cool with it, or at least come up with some compromise. Our dorms were apartment style, and this girl only lived on the floor beneath us. We didn't even understand why she needed to move in when she was only 20 seconds away. Anyways, she was just always in the way, using crap and eating crap that wasn't hers. My roommate and her would be super loud all the time, not just effing, but talking loudly and being obnoxious no matter what they were doing. And worst of all, she was like a effing Wookiee. And after they took showers together, the drain would be clogged and there would be 2 inches of gross Wookiee sex water at the bottom of the tub. I fortunately never had to deal with that because I was always up before them, but my roommate and BFF was always pissed about it. Finally, we tried bringing it up with our roommate, but he got pissed and super defensive about it. He just wouldn't talk to us. The next day, I left a note on his door saying I had emailed the head of housing about the issue, and we were going to have a meeting to discuss it. This was total bullcrap and a trap. I never emailed anybody. I knew that my roommate would send his own email to the head of housing to try and defend himself. Instead, all he ended up doing was ratting himself out to the head of housing, whom was very confused. The next day, my best friend and I come back from the dining hall, and the head of housing is there, and my roommate and his girlfriend are slowly and painstakingly having to carry all her crap back down from his room down to her room. We sat there watching TV, while also enjoying the entertainment from what I had wrought, but I did feel kind of bad about it because they both looked pretty bummed out, and it took them a while and a lot of trips up and down the stairs to finish. No more Wookiee sex water in the shower though, so I didn't feel that bad. Story 55. This is a long post, so I added a TLDR. It may not be that significant to others, but it's something I've never talked about and want to get out. When I was in elementary school, our playground had an old set of monkey bars that was away from the newer jungle gyms. Not many people cared for it because it was just 4 log posts with metal rods. I loved it though, and spent many recesses before sitting on top of it with my best friend. One day, I was at the monkey bars as usual. A few other kids were there as well. One of them was a girl I considered my friend. She was with another boy who decided it would be funny to push people. People asked them to stop, and they would just laugh and do it again. I was mad that my friend was pushing me even when I asked her to stop. I wasn't physically hurt, but my feelings were. Growing up, I wasn't usually confrontational with others. Half of me was upset, but the other half just wanted to fit in and thought if that's how they want to play, then I'll do it too. I went up behind the boy and pushed him. He fell but was okay. Instead of laughing, he was angry at me. That's when it changed from trying to fit in to getting my revenge. It wasn't fair that they could push others but didn't like to be pushed themselves. I was going to stick up for myself and show them both what it felt like. Next was the girl. That's where things went horribly wrong. I pushed her like I did the boy. She fell a lot harder than I thought she would, but unlike the boy, she didn't get up. She cried and cried but wouldn't get up. What happened next is a blur. Teachers ran over and surrounded her. We were told to stay back. Another teacher took my class to her room. She tried to distract us by reading a story, but that didn't cover up the sounds of the ambulance. I could hear the kids whispering, trying to figure out what happened. I felt like everybody was talking about me. I wanted to tell them that it was an accident. For things to happen this way. Instead, I just sat there quietly, full of guilt, wondering what was going to happen next. When I went home that day, my mother asked me how school was. That's the first time I ever lied to her. To this day, I don't know if the school ever called her to let her know what happened. Later that week, we made Get Well Soon cards. It was February, and I had a special heart-shaped confetti that I glued onto mine. When someone asked if they could use them too, I told them no. Mine had to be extra special. She has to know that I'm sorry and didn't mean it. What felt like an eternity later, she finally returned to school. Everybody wanted to talk to her and find out what happened. She told them how she broke her neck and had to spend time in the hospital. When I couldn't avoid her anymore, she told me I was going to pay for what happened and her parents were going to sue me. So, F that. Nobody else intervening when she was pushing other kids. F sitting in a room wondering if she was going to be okay. F me feeling like I had to lie to my mother about school that day. F using my favorite heart confetti for her Get Well card. Kids can be mean and accidents happen. The monkey bars are now long gone, and now me and that girl talk about which kind of apple juice we give our own kids. The incident hasn't been brought up since elementary school, and we've grown up and moved on. She didn't deserve to have her neck broken, and I didn't deserve to live in guilt over an accident. Story 56. A couple of buddies and I were hanging out at my friend's house after the last day of 8th grade, just swimming and thinking about how we had the whole summer ahead of us. My friend's next-door neighbors had these 2 kids that were in 6th grade, really annoying and wild, and always trying to torment my friend somehow. Basically, the 2 kids, they were both boys, had filled up a bunch of balloons with water and shaving cream and were chunking them into my friend's yard, getting shaving cream all over the place. That was annoying, but the bad part was that they also jumped the fence and were sticking hand shovels into my friend's yard and tearing up the ground, and then running around when we came up to them and taunting us when we told them to stop. So I went up to my friend's room, grabbed his airsoft gun, and walked back down with it behind my back. When they kept taunting us and running around in the yard, I pulled the airsoft gun out from behind my back and pointed it at them. Their attitudes changed very quickly when they saw the gun, from cussing at us and running around to pleading and apologizing. It was pretty funny. I unloaded on them until they managed to sprint back to their house, crying. Kind of sucks though, because about 30 minutes later, their mom came over to my friend's house to talk to his mom, super flustered, complaining that her kids were shot, as if they were shot with a real gun. I ended up getting in trouble, and she didn't even address that her kids totally ruined my friend's yard. Story 57. I think I may have told this story on a thread somewhere else, but it fits here too. I can't remember why I was so angry at my sister at the time, but I was around 7 years old, and she was around 9. I remember whatever it was, it went on for a while because I remember it taking weeks to come up with my plan for revenge. Context, she was always very underweight and unhealthy due to complications when she was born, so she was consistently anxious and uncoordinated and didn't stop wetting the bed until she was 7. My parents were always worried about her and how she was doing. Despite her somewhat frail nature, she was still very mean to me and would often escalate things until I couldn't get her back in any reasonable way. If she hit me, I'd hit her back, and then she'd swing something at me. Once she stabbed me in the knee for the TV remote. So I knew I couldn't respond lightly, because she'd just send me back worse, and I couldn't physically do anything terrible because she was frail, and my parents were always watching over her like a hawk. So for weeks, I would wait for her to fall asleep, and then pee on her, and every morning she'd wake up, crying, thinking she wet the bed. This went on for so long, my parents were considering therapy for her, which was a really big deal because therapy is expensive and we were poor as crap. For weeks, my sister cried about this until one night she woke up to hear me crying. My mom had me bent over her knee, spanking me with the belt, yelling at me about what I had been doing, and I couldn't even deny it. She had caught me in the act of peeing on my sister in her bed. Story 58. When I was about 14, a new kid moved in a couple of streets away. He was always coming up to me and my friends and would forcibly join in our games. He never waited to be invited to play with us, and he never asked if he could join in. In fact, most times he barely spoke to us, but when he did speak, he was always exaggerating and just really irritating. I remember he'd often get told to get out of the way, stop playing with us, nobody wants him there, and just to generally piss off, etc. He never listened and just carried on like we were all best mates. Looking back, the poor kid likely had some mental and social issues / Asperger's or autism. Anyways, one day, me and a friend were walking past his house. It was on the corner of a street and was on the way to the park. There were other routes to the park, but this was the shortest route. Plus, we knew he got really wound up if we walked past his house, so why not? On this occasion, he was playing in the garden and started giving out insults and general complaints about us being near his house. Both sides were giving it out, and he was getting worked up and being very verbal. At the back of his house, the driveway cut into the land and the fence was lower, so we walked up the drive and stood at the fence giving him grief. Next thing, he launches into full-on zombie rage mode and starts throwing large stones at us. Somehow, I managed to catch one and instinctively throw it back at him. At this point, he turns around screaming for his dad and heads to the door. Causing trouble then, screaming for his psychotic dad was a common tactic for him. He'd plead all innocent, and Daddy would go all Hulk smash. So this large stone is now flying through the air at speed, and wallop. It hit him in the back of the head, and he goes down like a sack of spuds. Me and my friend both look at each other and split up, heading to our homes at full speed. Hours later, the dad is pounding on my front door in full-on Hulk smash mode, scaring my parents to death, telling them how I attacked Hulk's poor little innocent baby boy, and that he'd apparently had to go to the hospital and have 10 stitches put in the back of his head. To make things worse, I had to go around to Baby Annoyance in Hulk Dad's house to apologize to the little crap. Story 59. Dude was walking up and down our work area. It's a huge conveyor belt, yelling crap like Black Power and F the White Nation, and a few other similarly worded statements. Being the only white guy in my work area of about 30 people, I took offense. I baited him with a couple shut the F up and a really low-key Sig Heal. He didn't take the bait, but kept on coming on with that racial bullcrap. Dude was a good 60 pounds heavier, at least half a foot taller than me, so I had to be smart, you know? I thought about it, and then asked a supervisor when they came close enough to move me because I was uncomfortable with some of the statements being made around me. Soup asked me to specify. I did loud enough for Black Power to overhear. Cue him starting to cuss me out, saying I'm not acting like a man, and then telling me we're gonna fight after the shift. I pretended to try and talk him down. I ain't a snitch, man. I just asked to move. I didn't even mention your dumbass, bro. You just bucked up instantly. And it worked him up even more, like it was supposed to. Supervisor came back around. I told him to bring some popcorn to the parking lot, because someone's about to get their ass whooped after work. He asked me to specify. I did. Dude got fired on the spot. Had a hearing a week later, and the termination upheld. Best part was a handful of my coworkers backing up the story to management. I really thought I was on a one-man team in the workplace for a while, but really though, at the end of the day, we're all just people. I only felt bad because dude just had a kid, but really though, F him. The downvotes bring back that guilt. That feeling of I just should have said F it and let it be. But this situation had been building up for months at that point. It's not like one day out of the blue this crap popped off. It's just that once he started throwing racist bullcrap around, I was finally done with this crap. I still feel justified. I just regret resorting to handling it in a way that got a dude fired. But really though, F him. I go to work, not listen to other people's bullcrap. You can't stop when confronted. Another way will be found. That's cause and effect for you. So I would have downvoted this post too. It sounds to me like OP is completely oblivious to the racial connotations of what he pulled there with that comment and with that remark. So yeah, downvoted, and maybe have a little bit more empathy for why that guy was doing what he was doing and why you retaliating in the way that you did is not appropriate. Story 60. When my brother and I were in middle school, he had a friend who lived across the street from us who started being really mean to him for no reason all of a sudden, so they stopped being friends. Well, while they were friends, the kid made the mistake of telling my brother his Facebook password. Turned out it was also his password for everything else, including email, which was rather helpful. And eventually, my brother wanted to get revenge for how mean the kid had been. So we hacked his Facebook and started posting a lot of embarrassing things and messaging all of the popular girls in their school saying weird stuff. We then also made a fake account and friended him, and through messaging him with the fake account became his friend, and got him to tell us all of his deepest secrets, which we would then expose to the world by going into his account and posting about them or messaging them to random people. Eventually he made the connection and blamed our fake account for doing the hacking, and we went along with it and started blackmailing him with that account and calling him from private numbers pretending to be that guy from the fake account. At the same time all this was going on, we were ordering a ton of food to his house on a daily basis and would watch out our windows. The delivery people would show up and his dad would come outside all confused and get visibly more and more frustrated each day. Eventually they started leaving their house every day around the time we would order food. We kept this up for a while and did some other stuff, but then it died down and we thought we'd never hear about it again. Fast forward a couple months, and my parents get a call asking for them to take my brother down to the police station. The family had gone to the cops, and they had been able to trace it back to my brother, and when he went down there, the cop managed to scare the crap out of him, and him and I got grounded from using the internet or having any fun at all for a good 6 months, and we had to pay for a lot of the food we ordered. Story 61. So, when I was about 5 years old, my best friend's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to get him something special. My mom had taken me to Toys R Us, RIP, and I saw this really badass tricycle. I was like, wow, that's what I want to get, insert friend's name, for his birthday. My mom didn't want to get it. After all, a trike is usually the type of gift that parents get for their own kids, and my mom didn't want to spend that much on a gift for some little kid. Not that it was expensive, but still understandable. Anyways, I decided to buy it with my own money that I had saved up. Just some cash for doing chores and helping out elderly neighbors and whatnot. So my mom reluctantly agreed to let me buy my friend the tricycle. Fast forward to the birthday party. My friend had opened all his presents and the tricycle was his favorite. All the kids were outside playing ball and tag and doing party crap, and my friend was having the time of his life with his new wheels. After a while, I went up to him and asked if I could try it out. His answer was no, and he was very rude about it. He threw a fit and was shouting that it was his bike and blah blah blah. I mean, we were 5, so that was pretty typical behavior for that type of situation, but I wasn't having any of it. I was furious. I had spent my hard-earned money to get my best friend this tricycle, and he treated me like garbage in return. I got upset and started pushing and hitting at him, so he tried riding away from me. He ended up riding out into the street in front of a vehicle and got hit. I don't remember much more about what happened. I don't remember whether or not he lived. I don't think any of the adults realized that I had basically pushed him out of there. They just thought he rolled out there by himself. I don't even remember the kid's name, but the memory of that incident has stuck with me my whole life. How do you not remember if he lived or not? I mean, I feel like if he didn't live, you would remember that, so let's just assume that he's still alive? Maybe just got tapped by the vehicle? That's terrible. Story 62. My best friend and I had been playing practical jokes on each other for a year when I saw an ad for a small electronic device called an ideation. It's a circuit board about the size of a matchbook and has a magnet to hold it in place on a metal surface. It randomly chirps or beeps and drives the victim crazy. So my buddy, Mike, calls me and asks me to come over to his mobile home and help him install a wireless router so he can get on the internet for the first time. He's not a tech person. As we're setting things up, he takes his dog out for a minute and I slip the ideation into a pocket door track and push it along the metal track so it's out of sight. Unfortunately, I don't hear it the rest of the time I'm there. I call a mutual friend and he loves the idea and tells me he will let me know if Mike says anything about the beeping. I'm out of town for 2 weeks and no mention of the beep, so I stop by Mike's place and again, he takes the dog out and I rush to the doorway and pull the circuit board out and fiddle with the switches. It immediately buzzes and I slide our back in place and go back to sitting on the couch. Mike comes back and as we're talking, he grabs the TV remote and hits mute and says, "Did you hear that?" I play it cool and decide I better leave before I start laughing, so I leave and head home. The next day, our mutual friend calls and is laughing so hard I can't understand what he's saying. I finally understand the buzzing is driving Mike nuts, so I give him a call. He answers the phone, and before I can say anything, he says, "I'll have to call you back. It's starting to rain, and all my stuff is getting ruined." So I call the mutual friend, and he explains that Mike has been hearing the buzzing going on for 2 days, and he thought he had tracked it down to a dehumidifier in his gun safe. When that didn't end up being the cause of the noise, he ended up taking every device in his home that plugs in the wall or has a battery in it outside and laying it on the lawn. So when I had called to check on him, all of his electronics were outside and it had started to rain. The next day I called again and he answered real quick and says, "Sorry, can't talk right now. I have an electrician here and he's trying to find the short in my wall," and hangs up. I call him back and he explains the electrician has pulled out all of the breakers from his panel and they still hear the noise. So I ask him if the buzzing is really driving him mad, and right then the electrician pulls the unit out of the door track. So he laughs at first and thinks it's funny, but then tells me his landlord paid for the electrician and I owe him the money for the service call. The next day I call to see if he calmed down yet and ask about the cost of the electrician, and he tells me when he explained the situation to the landlord, he thought it was so funny he's not going to charge for the electrician. It took a few weeks, but he finally forgave me. He tried pulling a stupid prank on me a few weeks later, but it failed before he even got to spring the joke. We finally agreed it had gone too far and quit pulling pranks. Story 63. A little late to the party. I posted this a while back, so I apologize if you've already seen it. But it was the first thing I thought of when I read the question. The year was 1980-something, and I was in 5th grade. I was a chubby white nerd. There was an Arab kid from 6th grade who used to bully me with his friends. Mostly just shoving, name-calling, and heckling, but there were a few times they got really nasty. Once when I was feeling sick and I was in the bathroom at school. By total coincidence, the leader of this group saw me go in. I puked in the toilet, and the next thing I knew, he was behind me and pushed my face into my own puke. Another time, they picked up some dog crap on the way home. They picked it up with a paper bag, ran it behind me, and smashed the bag of dog crap on my head. This kind of stuff, mostly just heckling and fear-jeering, happened every day after school. They lived 1 block past me, so no matter what route I took home, they would follow without being inconvenienced. Every day, as I'd break off toward my house at the end of my walk, the leader kid would say, "You know, you better not tell anyone, right?" I'd say nothing, and I told no one. After stuff like the puke and dog crap incidents, he'd grab me, get in my face, make some comment about how I was a total piece of garbage, and then he'd say, "If you tell anyone, I will kill you." I never told anyone because the way he said it made me believe he'd either kill me or beat me to within an inch of my life. My uncle was a trucker. Not actually my uncle, but I called him my uncle. He used to drive cross country, and he always took his dog, Brutus. Despite his tough name, Brutus was a tiny Pomeranian. We were at his house, and he was telling us a story about 2 guys who tried to rob him at a truck stop while he was walking his dog. Having been a trucker for 20 plus years, he was used to seedy characters and hookers and drug dealers at truck stops. He was also well aware of wildlife that would come out to scrounge in the dumpsters, and had come face to face with hungry forest creatures who thought his dog was a meal. Whenever he'd go out at night, he'd take his tire thumper. It's basically an 18 to 24-inch hard wooden stick used to test semi-truck tires. Don't ask how it works, I'm not a trucker. Anyway, the 2 guys confront him, and he goes for his wallet. He grabs the thumper hanging off his belt instead. He whacks one guy in the head and the other runs away. He takes off, and he ended his story by saying that he didn't know how hard he hit the guy. He wonders to this day if he actually may have killed the guy, but he says he looked at newspapers and never found anything. But this was the 80s. Once he left town, it would probably be hard to look up something like that. Anyway, as he told his story, all I could think of was, man, I wish I had a tire thumper to take care of that prick who bullies me. I think of his comment about the forest creatures, and I ask if he has another tire thumper, because there's a mean dog that barks at me when I walk my own dog, and that thumper sounds like a good protection in case the dog ever comes after us. He takes me out to his garage and hands me a tire thumper. I still remember that he had like 20 of them, and they all had logos on them. I guess banks give out free pens with Chase Bank, and truck supply places give out free tire thumpers with Tony's Truck Part Emporium. The one he gave me was from National Truck Parts. The bullying continues. I keep the thumper in the umbrella sleeve on the side of my backpack. I'm too afraid to use it. It's always 3 or 4 against 1. I might whack one, but the others could get me. I bide my time. On occasion, I see him alone after school, so I figure maybe I'll make the one-on-one stand at that point. I don't know. I'm just scared overall. This effing kid is like well beyond twice my size. He was probably a retard who got held back and should have been in high school. I don't really know, but he was by far the biggest kid in the school. Anyway, my school is doing a project on liberty, and every class is making models of some kind of monument. Big models. My class was doing the Statue of Liberty out of chicken wire and clay and paper mache. The teacher offered extra credit for anyone who stayed after school. I stayed. I'm walking home after school, figuring I'm safe since they left over an hour ago. Lo and behold, here comes the bully right behind me. He must have stayed with his class too. He's alone. He's not saying anything, just walking. I get to what we call the trails. It's a chunk of land where no houses had been built on the block. It was about 6 empty plots on one side and 2 on the other, shaped like an L, so you could cut through the middle instead of going all the way around the block. It was like a sparse forest, and kids would come here to ride their bikes on the little trails that weave through the trees and around the bushes. I would always take this shortcut on my way to school, but never on the way home. They usually weren't there to follow me to school, so I felt safe cutting through the little woods in the morning. This time, I decided to take the shortcut home, and if he followed me, I'd beat his ass. As I got to the trails, he started up with, "Hey, fatso," and "I don't have my boys. You think you can take me?" Taunting bullcrap. I got about 20 feet into the woods, and I heard him say, "Hey, if I cut your fat ass up in here, nobody's gonna find you for days." I looked back and he had a pocket knife. He was waving it at me. I said something like, "Just leave me alone." And he said, "Time to get a little piggy." He started running at me. I grabbed my tire thumper and swung blindly. I heard a crack and a scream. It was a blood-curdling scream. I don't even know what I hit, but he was on the ground crying like a baby. I lifted the thumper above my head to beat the ever-loving crap out of him, and he screamed for me to stop. My blind rage/fear clicked off. He was begging me to go get help. Being a kid, I said something like, "I don't want to get in trouble," or some stupid crap, but I was starting to feel really, really bad about this. I mean, he was hurt. He was hurt bad. I was just about to take my lumps and run to get help when, through his tears, he said, "Go get me help, you fat effing pussy." I thought for a second. Rage clicked on, and I brought that thumper down in his thigh as hard as I could. I heard a crack, and that rage clicked off immediately and turned to confusion. Not remorse, maybe fear? I don't know. He screamed again. The begging continued. He pleaded for me to get help. Now, all of a sudden, he was being very polite. Out of nowhere, I heard someone yelling from the street 20 to 30 to 40 feet away. "Are you okay in there? Hello?" I dropped down, covered his mouth with my hand, looked him straight in the eye and said, "If you tell anyone, I will effing kill you with your own knife after I break both of your effing legs." Apparently, I'm a good actor because his eyes reflected the fact that he totally believed me and completely understood. I took the pocket knife, hunkered down, and ran out of the forest toward my house. He wasn't in school for about a week. I was crapping bricks about getting in trouble, but no one ever came for me or questioned me. Without him, his buddies left me alone on the way home. When he came back, he had an arm in a cast. First hit, the blind one, and his leg in a cast. The second hit. The story he gave everyone was that he was walking through the trails and fell off the makeshift ramp some kids built for their bikes. He never bothered me again. His friends never bothered me either. I kept that thumper with me every day, though. Probably stupid to carry around the weapon, but I was maybe 10 or 11 at most. I didn't know any better. I stashed his pocket knife in some insulation under a floor plank in the attic of my grandparents' house that weekend. They sold the house shortly thereafter, and I never had a chance to go back. I wonder if it's still there. In any case, that was the only thing I've ever done that outright hurt another person, and it's probably the only story I haven't told anyone. Not my wife, not my best friends, no one. I still think about this 25 to 30 years later, and I still feel horrible about it. I always have, but I justify it because of the bullying. And when I was about to go get him help and bite the bullet for what I'd done, he pushed me again. I just snapped, and of course he recovered, so it's not like I left him crippled for life. I've Googled him over the years, and while he was arrested for domestic battery and animal abuse in the late 90s, he owns his own business now, and his Facebook page gives the impression that he's turned himself around. He's married to another lady and has a couple kids. His current wife is a big lady, and I have a feeling that if he tried smacking her around, she'd lay his ass out worse than I did. Story 64. Our history class teacher in high school really sucked. Sometimes she rambled about reminiscing in the past and not really teaching us anything useful, while other times she would grill people with questions until they got something wrong. Grading was somewhat arbitrary, with 2 girls always getting good grades without doing anything. One guy getting constantly grilled and always receiving bad grades, and another dude whose German wasn't as good as the others, constantly getting corrected in a demeaning way. It got so bad that WW had an arms race with history books. Since it was the advanced history course, we already had 4 books, but one student had recently transferred from another school which had the perfect book, perfect for surviving the grilling sessions. Everyone also got the book to be able to answer her questions as quickly and accurately as the transfer student could, as to not look unprepared in comparison. Fed up with that kind of treatment, we created the Ask Card. Arshkart, rewarded to the student that became her victim of the day. I created elaborate statistics for who got it when and how bad they got grilled, and we always had a good laugh. Come graduation and the final yearbook, time for revenge. The entire 2 pages for the Advanced History course class of 2008 consisted of comedically mocking her bad teaching skills, the chaotic lessons, stupid things people said, and of course, the detailed version of my ass card statistics, honoring the Ukrainian guy and the other dude for their insane collection of ass cards. After submitting our page, my phone rings a week later, and it's the student tasked with layouting the book. The principal, which was also our advanced history teacher, wants the ass card statistics removed. She deemed them hurtful and disrespectful for the people getting the most cards. I am furious. Who can she not understand that they wanted that statistic because they felt so mistreated? In my anger, I just put a huge black box where the ass card circle would have been, with a white text rambling about how we were being censored by the school and how authorities censoring the free speech of an advanced history class is spitting in the face of what teaching history in Germany is all about. My class all sign off on the text. The Ukrainian dude even sharpens the wording, and we send it back to the layout guy. The next day the phone rings, and it's my teacher/principal on the line, in tears, crying. She said how stressful the last year was, being announced temporary principal, being 1 year away from retirement, and teaching history being her life. She was devastated by what she read and didn't want her entire legacy tarnished by what we wrote. I felt incredibly crappy and broke the news to the rest of the class. We all agreed that while the course was a nightmare, we weren't crappy enough people to pull through with the whole thing. The article was changed and everyone was fine with the way we changed it. I still have the original and censored version on my computer for old time's sake. Asgard champions, your hardships will never be forgotten. Story 65. In school I had this friend. I'm calling him DH for dickhead. So DH and I, for the most part, were friends. Copied homework from each other and shared lunch. About a month before our breaks for our exams, a textbook of mine went missing. I looked everywhere for that book, and 3 weeks before, I decided to get a photocopy of the lessons. So I asked DH for his book, but he wasn't in class, so I went through his bag and found the book. I went looking through it and I realized A, his index was torn out, and B, there is a tip X on the margins which covered writing, and C, the dumbass had scribbled on my writing to write his name. I took the book and confronted DH. The guy begged and pleaded to me not to tell our teacher because that would probably get him suspended or something. I was seething, but I thought I got my book back and he's sorry about it, so no harm done. I told him I wouldn't tell our teacher. Back at home, and I was thinking about the whole situation and realized that the effer was going to let me fail. That enraged me, so I cooked up a plan. Next day, I took our class topper's social studies notebook and snuck it inside DH's bag before we left for the bus. A few days before the break, during our lunch break, I see our class topper freaking out. So I ask her what's wrong. She says she lost her notebook, and I tell her what happened with me and that it's probably with DH. It was beautiful. She stormed to his bench, took his bag, and went through it before finding her copy. Slapped him and called him a bunch of creative names, all in front of a full class. This much I counted on happening. What I didn't count on was the DI, disciplinary in charge, patrolling the halls and seeing the whole thing. He walks in just as the lunch break gets over, calls DH and our class topper, they leave. 15 minutes later, I get called to the principal's office. I don't know why. I take my book and leave. In the principal's office, I see our class teacher, the DI, principal, and vice principal. Did DH take your book? The DI asked me. Yes, sir, I reply and show him the book. He tore out my index page, wrote over my notes, and put tip X on my book so I wouldn't recognize it. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I found it in his bag and he said he was sorry. I didn't think he'd have taken someone else's notebook too. They told me to leave with the CT and return to class. Next day, I find out that DH has been suspended for the rest of the week and would not be able to give his exams. It gets worse. This was a term exam which counts toward the final grade. Because he had to miss it, he ended up repeating the grade. Story 66. Back when I was young, sometime in early high school, there was this kid, let's call him Brad, who would try to get 2 boys to fight each other in a boxing match in the upstairs of his parents' spare garage, just now realizing how wealthy this kid's family was. He would goad the 2 into being mad at each other by lying to them about mean crap the other one had said about the other, then get them to put on boxing gloves while he and his friends watched. Weird, sick amusement over the suffering of other people. I had grown up with Brad, but never ended up very close with him. Still, I was around enough in this small town slash school that even I had heard of this boxing thing. One day, Brad invites me over, and he hadn't invited me over in what it felt like years. I declined, thinking it was related to this boxing thing, and I didn't want to fight anybody nor watch anyone fight. So I told him. He called me stupid and threatened me if I told anyone about it. Of course, he was a buff wrestling jock, who later found out was using steroids, but his lactating nipples are another story. And I was a small, sad art kid. So the threat took, and I didn't tell anyone about the boxing matches. Oddly enough, the next week another kid approached me. Let's call him Matt. Now, I didn't have a lot of friends. Being a quiet boy who cries at sad moments in high school doesn't make you very popular. But I got along with Matt. Strangely, Matt is pissed at me without explanation. I put two and two together and tell him Brad is a liar who's just trying to get us to fight for his amusement. He doesn't believe me, of course, and continues trying to start crap with me in gym class. He shoves me, and I fail one last time to defuse the situation. At this point, I'm fed up, tired of dealing with all my family crap just to come to school and deal with some manipulative a-holes mindless minions, while trying to get good enough grades so I can leave this small town behind permanently and never see these people again. Matt shoves me again, and I snap. I'm about 6 inches shorter than this guy, so I grab his neck, throw a foot behind him, knock him down, and start kicking him. I kick and kick and kick while screaming at him until someone pulls me off and the teacher intervenes. I think eventually Brad got in trouble, but Matt had broken ribs and wasn't in school for a while. I always felt bad, kinda still do, that I got revenge on the wrong person. Someone who was just another victim to the school bully. Now, poetic justice would be two people that this Brad guy's trying to pit against each other, coming to the realization that they're being played, and then in unison, those two get together and they take out Brad 2-on-1. That'd be pretty cool. Story 67. Wow, I almost forgot about this. This is going to make me look like a horrible person, but here goes. We were freshmen in high school gym class. This girl, we'll call her Jay, because I don't actually remember her name, obviously had a crush on me and wouldn't leave me alone. Some days it was fine. I would do something she wouldn't do, like play basketball or whatever. But some days she'd go running around the track with me and the guys or hang out and read/do homework by the bleachers. But gym was the only time I really saw Jay. One day, Jay had just pushed me too far. She asked me a lot of personal questions and wanted to know what I was looking for in a girl. So I developed a story to tell her on the spot. We walked over to the racquetball court, where nobody went for some reason, and began pouring my heart out to her. I told her about this girl I've been dreaming about, how I feel like I see her all the time, between classes, across the cafeteria at lunch, but how I always have very little time to talk to her. I told her how beautiful this girl is, and vaguely described her to the point where I knew Jay thought I was talking about her. I told her how I planned to ask this girl out, but I was too shy, too afraid of rejection. She spoke for the first time during this encounter, asking if there was any way she could help, and maybe the feeling was mutual. As I saw her confidence building, I knew I should end this charade. I said something to the effect of, "Nah, you wouldn't know her. Besides, she's not at school today." She pushed me away and took off crying. One of her friends came running to me, asking what happened. I said, how should I know? The next few days were weird. Groups of girls who knew Jay would stop and stare as I walked past. The few times I saw Jay, she was with a group of her friends who would basically block her out of my view. The few times we locked eyes, she looked terrible. All of this happened towards the end of the school year. Out of the last month, she maybe attended class 4 or 5 times that I saw. Eventually, the year ended, and I asked a mutual friend about Jay. They told me she was really depressed and convinced her parents to move, and ended up going out of the state. That was over 10 years ago, and I haven't heard anything since. The times I've told the story, less so now. I just feel like a total a-hole. Story 68. I used to get into little prank wars with my friends. One night, when I got into bed, I discovered that someone placed a big rubbery dildo under the blankets. I immediately knew it was the friend I was living with, as nobody else had access to my room. I decided I'd return the favor. He was going on a trip that weekend, and while his luggage was unguarded, I wrapped the dildo up in some of the clothes. In my mind, he'd discover it in his hotel room and would be forced to find a way to get rid of it himself. I got a phone call from him that I gladly answered. He was livid. Apparently, he was trying to find something in his luggage with his friends in the room, and couldn't figure out what he wrapped up in his shorts. As he held them up to unfurl them, the dildo rolled out. Phones did too, and everyone began to take pics/record video as he insisted it wasn't his. So on the phone, I laughed it off and told him to not put dildos in my bed if he doesn't want them returned. Only thing was, he was still denying, which was strange because he liked to brag about his pranks. Later that day, I got a message from an ex-roommate asking me if I liked the gift she left me. Apparently, she returned when nobody was home to return her key and get a few remaining boxes. It was during that time that she got the idea to leave one of her toys in my bed because she thought it'd be funny. Turned out I got the wrong target. I didn't even mean for him to end up being recorded with it. I completely thought that the worst that would happen would be him running out in the middle of the night to dispose of it in a dumpster before being seen. Story 69. I was a vengeful kid. I moved a lot, so there was a lot of anger there. I have 3 things that still make me feel guilty. At first, I was in 3rd grade, and I was brand new to this rural Texas school. The bus ride was 2.5 hours, so it left us with a lot of free time. One girl took this time to torment not just me, but all of the girls in the bus, including her supporters. She would say things about my paleness, my butt chin, and most hurtful, my stutter. She would mock me and pretend to stutter until I was in near tears. I didn't have any friends there yet. I only made 2, one that tried to steal my shoes, but that's another story. So I had no one to help me or confide in. When I moved to the front of the bus to get away, I met this boy who was just as bad. He would flick my ears and push me and trip me, and as the bus driver was someone in his extended family, she seemed to ignore it. One day, I was in the middle of the bus and they teamed up on me. I was in near tears, and he said, "Just say chigger and I'll leave you alone." Confused, I said it. He then raised hell, yelling that I had said the N-word and the bus driver wouldn't hear my protests. She wrote me up. That was the last straw. I wrote a letter, a vulgar letter. Pretty vulgar even by my standards now, thanks to the creative insults from South Park, that ripped the back of the bus female dog to shreds and called her every name under the book. I then delivered it to her. I told her the boy had given it to me and wanted me to give it to her since he wouldn't be on the bus that night. The next day, the boy and the girl were both absent from the bus. My stomach churned. I asked around. No one knew anything except her supporters, who said she'd gotten really upset about the letter. I went home that night and told my mother. I was distraught. I told her about all the abuse and bullying and that I didn't want to be a part of it, and that I was so incredibly sorry I had written such a nasty, mean letter. I hadn't told her before because at the time, she was in the middle of one of her long drug-worsened bipolar episodes, and I didn't want her to be unresponsive to it, which always hurt the worst. She took me to school the next morning, though, and I told the principal everything. The conversation went much better than I expected. She required 1 day of after-school detention, but she also told me that because I came forward and was willing to apologize, she thought I had learned from it. She told me that if anyone ever bullied me again, to just come straight to her. She called the other 2 involved in, and they never bothered me again. This is pretty long now. The other 2 things are revenge for a guy breaking my jaw with a baseball. I got him back twofold. If anyone wants to hear it, I'll post it. I think this story is just cuter. Story 70. An ex-girlfriend of mine was unhappy about the breakup and decided that a good revenge would be to call pizza delivery services and cabs to my home in the dozens, all at the same time. When the doorbell rang and I looked outside, it looked like a union meeting or a protest of the pizza delivery and cab industry. All the guys were already discussing what was going on. There were cars parked all over the driveway and on both sides of the street. I didn't count them, but it sure looked like 2 or 3 dozen. She must have called every available company in the city. So the designated spokesperson who rang my doorbell asked straightforward if I'm nuts or if this is a bad joke. All of these angry faces staring at me and waiting for an explanation about what was going on. Some of them already calling their boss and talking about suing me. We stared at each other for a couple of seconds with awkward silence, and then I started to explain that I did not call any of them. Then the spokesperson asked me if I had any idea whom had called them. Then it made it click, and I remembered my ex-girlfriend who was pretty mad at me for breaking up with her. I told them briefly about the breakup, which happened a couple of days before, and that this would be the only person I could imagine which could have a beef with me and also knew where I lived. So they asked me if I had her address, which I gave them without thinking about it twice. These guys wanted money for the cab fare, for the pizzas, and they were talking about suing me, so I just reacted. I never thought too much about that incident other than to tell a funny story about breakups gone wrong, until I heard a couple of years later from a common friend that all of the drivers went directly to her address to complain. They ended up suing her, which led to a conviction for fraud and ended up with a huge legal bill for her and a conviction, which then afterwards got her fired from her job. That was the point where I started to feel really bad about my decision to tell them her home address without thinking about the consequences. After all, I was the one who broke up with her, so she had a valid point with being mad at me. The way she decided to get back at me was not the foxiest, but I have to admit, she was not the brightest candle in the chandelier, which was the main reason I broke up with her in the first place.